So I call the meeting of the Select Board to order today, March 20th at 5:07 p.m. I'll take roll call. Mr. Gito.
Yes.
Mr. McCrisky.
Here.
And I am here. A motion to open the meeting.
So made. Second.
All in favor, and I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Gito.
I'm here.
Mr. McCrisky.
Aye.
And I am here. If you are able to stand, I ask you to do so we can salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with Governor Baker's declaration of June 16, 2021, granting certain pandemic-related authorizations related to public board and town meetings, and recently extended until March 31, 2023, this meeting will be conducted both in person and virtually via Google Meets. The meeting may be recorded by SMAC, cable television, and broadcast live, and may be live streamed at www.stoughtontv.org. A recording of the meeting, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings will be posted on the town's website and or SMAC as soon as possible after the meeting if live broadcast or live streaming is unsuccessful. Times are approximate, and we only have one agenda item for tonight. But I would like, in full disclosure, before I thank the town manager and all of those that are helped to support this discussion tonight, is to say this is really an informational meeting. It's called a select board meeting because there is a quorum present. For open meeting purposes, we had to call this a select board meeting. But with that said, thank you, Mr. Coulter, for the transparency and for answering questions and for the presentation. What will happen next, the select board will move to the front row of where the audience is sitting, and all of the presenters will come to the front. After the questions are answered and led by and facilitated by the town manager, Mr. Coulter, we will adjourn the select board meeting for open meeting purposes. Thank you very much, and without further ado, we will move to our front row seats. Yeah. Here you go.
Get the
the information bigger. I've taken out select board meetings as part of that. These are just public information hearings. And if you look, you'll see the topic, you'll see when we're going to meet. I hope that clarifies things. They'll all be in this room. They'll all be at 6 o'clock to try to accommodate everybody. And again, I offer my deepest apologies for any confusion I personally may have created. When I came here as your town manager, I really developed 3 priorities, or 4 priorities for myself. The first one was to put this town back on good financial footing. That's what I do for a living. That's what I did in buying companies that were all broken. My second priority was to promote open transparency, open communication, fact-driven dialogue and debate. That's what this meeting is about tonight, and what these future meetings I'm holding of information sessions are about. My third priority was to try and create some sort of civil discourse, or better yet, some sort of professional decorum about how we disagree. When I made the decision to come here, it was a difficult decision. I wasn't real happy about the way the town treats each other. See, I consider people in this town as brothers and sisters, and I guess I'm a stepchild. But the way people disagree is not okay. It's not okay. It's why we're 10 people down in our police department. It's why we can't recruit people to work here in Town Hall. We're down a half a dozen people in Town Hall and across the organization. We have got, as a community, very real and exciting opportunities. And if this were a different agenda, I'd go through them for you. We have also got very real and difficult challenges that are all fixable if we can work together, if we can treat each other like families of the town of Stoughton, citizens of the town of Stoughton. A great United States Senator, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, said very profoundly one time, he said, everybody in America, due to our First Amendment rights, are entitled to their own opinions. And boy, we will not do anything to undermine that. But he continued to say, they're also not entitled to their own facts. Facts are friendly. There's not good facts or bad facts. There's not my facts or your facts. There are just facts. And that's what's wrong with our country. And I see that trickling in, maybe it's been here for years, to the town of Stoughton, is we have more emotion-based arguments than we do fact-driven arguments. So that's the end of my opening comments. I want to talk to you about the process tonight. The professionals who sit up here before you are going to present 11 issues that are the most common asked questions or sources of misinformation regarding this fire department project. They're not going to try to convince anybody of anything. They're going to provide defensible, real information. They're not going to draw a conclusion. They're just going to give you information in response to the various questions that have been raised and the various statements that have been made. When they're done with number 1, we will take 3 questions from the audience. When we're done with those 3 questions, we'll move on to number 2. When we're done with that presentation, we'll take 3 questions from the audience, and all the way up to number 11. When the presentation is done, we will open up the floor for as many questions as you want to ask and for as long as you want to ask them. There's no end time posted for this meeting. If you have a question, if you have a concern, you should feel free to ask it. And you should be absolutely certain that regardless of what side of the issue you're on, you'll be respected. That's so important to good government. It's so darn important to good government. Now, I'm the moderator. If someone is disrespectful, I'm going to ask them to please be respectful. That's the extent of your punishment. But it's just please be respectful. Pose a question in a respectful way. Don't attack anybody. We're here to get information on a decision that's already been made, but the process has left people very uncomfortable and very distrusting. I hope to address that tonight. So by the end of the meeting, if you disagree, I'm going to be the first one to say to you, that's okay. You're entitled to that. At least we know you've heard information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the first speaker, and I don't have my agenda here. I think it is. Thank you, Chief. And you have the agenda in front of me. If you don't have it, ask for one. We'll get it right to you. Again, the first speaker will speak. We'll take 3 questions. I'll recognize you. If you're not recognized, you'll get the opportunity at the end to ask as many questions as you'd like to ask. One last point. If because of starting the meeting at 5 prevents people from getting here, and the group wants the same meeting scheduled again a couple of weeks from now, we'll do that. We'll have another public meeting after John's done with the budget. Oh, thank you, John. We will have another meeting at the request of this body. So thank you for being here. This is what citizenship, this is what democracy, this is what deliberation is all about. We look forward to all of your questions and to having a very meaningful and purposeful evening. And as John just pointed out, if everyone could silence their phones, would appreciate it. So with that, we bring you Chief Carroll. Thanks, Chief. Feel free to be up there.
Well, I just feel better, I guess, walking around. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I think it's important that part of this presentation had a little bit of history. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure most of you do know the history of Freeman Street, the fire station, how we've gotten to where we've gotten tonight. But I thought it was important to just at least touch on this. Freeman Street was built, well, first it was voted on in 1925. It moved from the basement of Town Hall here. So, and they picked Freeman Street as the site. Actually, the state police had told them they could no longer hold public meetings if there was fire apparatus or fires, fire apparatus and horses, to be honest with you, stored down in the basement. So there I am. Okay. So just, I mean, I have a pretty good context, but I'm sure people will correct me if. So in 1927, it was opened. We're going on 100 years now. There's been, back in the 60s, I believe 67, 68, committees were formed. I think if you look at the town meeting book back then, it said that there was a committee and there was a vote taken to either reconstruct, build a new fire station, or renovate and add to the current Freeman Street station. So they put 2 bays on in 1970. One's a mechanics bay and one's the other apparatus bay we know as Bay 5. Then in 1997, after the tragic death of firefighter Victor Melindi, who died while searching for victims in a rooming house right in this parking lot back here, many studies came out, the MMA study being the number one. Talked about operations, facilities, personnel, policies, procedures. But one thing they did touch on is that we needed another fire station. This town is growing, and Freeman Street is getting too old. It was named as deplorable back in '69. So again, not much had been done other than the 2 additions. The town responded and built Central Street Station, which is about 1.2 miles away from Freeman Street. That number 1.2 miles is actually kind of important because it falls into the next. After that, 2001 opening, 2007 feasibility study by the McGuire Group, who recommended 2 fire stations be built, one in East Stoughton, and if possible, if the town had the funding, to build one also in North Stoughton. But East Stoughton was the number one area that needed the protection, need for response time, running routes. And they had chosen, they said the Line Lumber Road area, Prospect Park, that area there. Although it was voted down at town meeting, they voted to put some money into Freeman Street, but again, we needed to, it just was never enough. We kept putting more and more money into Freeman Street without a lot of good results. 2010, DRA Associates conducted a facility master plan. Freeman Street was a priority. And I apologize, I skipped one. 2010. 2016, town meeting approved a public safety building. 2018 to the present is where we're at now. How are we doing? So these are the studies right here, and these are where no actions were taken. And I think it's just important that you have a historical context of the facility, why we're doing what we're doing, why we're so passionate about getting an operational fire station in East Stoughton, not only for us or the firefighters. As a matter of fact, not even for me. I'm not going up there. Administration is going to go to Freeman Street. But it's for the men and women of the Stoughton Fire Department. But more importantly, and we'll get into this further down in my presentation, it's about looking at incident maps and where do we respond to the most, and how can we help the citizens of Stoughton by responding in a faster, more efficient time, not a faster speed, a faster, more efficient time to help the residents of Stoughton. So, you know, the three-station model that Freeman Street, which, you know, as hard as it is sometimes to operate out of, it's a building that this town should cherish. Back when it was opened, it was the crown jewel. There were fire chiefs from all over New England coming to look at it, mimic it, understand it. It's just too small for the apparatus. 1/3 of our apparatus accidents are at Freeman Street itself. And it's no fault of the firefighters. The building is just too small. It was made for 1926 apparatus, and now we're in 2022. So that's the why. Why? It's designed and built for 1926 apparatus. There's no facilities for the female firefighters. We've adapted. We put a lock on the bathroom door so when they need it, they can go in, lock the door behind them. There's no dormitories for them. So there's an absolute need. It's not ADA compliant. And then the response, the pulling out into the center, as anybody knows, sometimes, as my father does, he avoids the center just to get home, you know? So we all understand that. So it's to alleviate also traffic in the downtown. Just that overview there, you can see where it was squeezed in. What we're dealing with. Cars use it as a cut through now, so we're just always careful about pulling out. Parking's an issue. So I hope that just kind of brings you up to date with the history. And as I've always said in all these, whether it's on, you know, I'm available. I'm available. Call my station, come by, and myself, my assistant chief, or any one of the firefighters standing out back would be happy. I think they're all pretty well versed in this whole thing. Okay, thank you.
Chief, to be made then, the chief is going to take 3 questions from the audience, and then we'll go on to the next question, take 3 questions, and then at the end, we'll open it up to as many questions as the citizens want to ask, and whatever time it takes to answer. So, first question for the chief. Andy. Yes, sir.
Chief, how many firefighters do you have?
So I apologize. Currently, we have a total of 63 firefighters. We're hoping to get to 65, but that means right now we have 3 groups at 13, 1 at 14. I apologize, 3 groups at 14, 1 at 15. We have 1 engine down at Station 2, and I get into that a little bit more on the other thing, and we have engine, 2 ambulances, and our shift commander up at Freeman Street.
Does that include EMS?
That includes EMS, yeah. We cross-staff to our ladder. So the ambulance goes over to the ladder on fire calls.
And how many will be assigned on the crossfire?
So I've presented again, but I'm happy to answer that. Our goal is to get an ambulance down to Station 2. What we like about this three phase of the project is once Prospect Street, once that fire station is built, we move out of Freeman, we renovate Freeman Street, administration will go up there, Emergency Operations Center, Department of Public Health Office, and once we move out up there, we can actually build Station 2 out to facilitate all the members of the department, and that includes the women on the department. We have 3 members who are women on this department, and they're very flexible. I have to give it to them. They adjust really well to the conditions, but we'll do living quarters will be upstairs there, so they'll have their own separate dorms and a place to go. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, we have one firefighter who's a mother of 2, and not looking to embarrass her, this is really it. She comes in and she has to nurse, right? And she has no way to do it privately, unless she locks herself in the bathroom or goes in a back room, almost like a closet size. It's not right. So these are some of the issues we're up against. We're just trying to make it better, so it's more of a better workplace.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
I would ask gentlemen, sir, if you would mind to identify yourself.
Steve Carter, 850 Bar Street.
Thanks, Steve. Would everybody identify themselves when they speak? Any more questions for the chief? If not, we'll move on to the legal system.
Yeah, 2.
It's a comment. You need to use a mic, the people in the audience need to use a mic, or I might as well be at home.
Thank you, Cynthia. Duly noted, thank you. Yes.
Peter Ventresco. I'm still a little fuzzy when you got How we doing?
Good. How you doing?
Peter Ventresco, 587 Canton Street, town meeting member. I'm a little fuzzy on the Station 1 going to be an office for all the safety people. How many people are going to be housed in there that we need? Are we going to have big rooms half the size of this for each office? So, and plus, it's going to cost a lot more than originally projected because the cost of everything has gone up. So, answer that question. How many people are going to be housed in there full-time?
Sure.
2.
No, sure. I will answer that.
Oh,
I
I thought you said
apologize.
2.
Thank you for the question.
The rooms are going to be this big.
2.
This whole hall.
Just 2 of us. So we have upstairs, our day staff is 6 members, myself, the assistant chief, deputy of EMS, operations, our training division, which has 2, a captain and a lieutenant, and our training and safety captain. Also, our program administrator will be up there, so there's 7. So there'll be 7 offices up there. Obviously, there'll be EMS storage, which is, as you all know, it's so vital, especially during COVID, where we were scrambling for it, and then we had no place to put it. So the design, which the architects are working on, is really well designed. Downstairs, an emergency operations center, which this town has needed for years, and I can't believe we've gotten by without it, to be honest with you. We're one of the only communities without an emergency operations center. What that means that if there is a major storm, major event, any evacuations. As a matter of fact, I was just working with the Brockton chief, and he was going to go over to the emergency operations center and pull all of the command staff in, be able to have direct communication. So these things are where we have to catch up.
All right, it just seems like to me it's a big building, and maybe you could split it up in different buildings.
So the whole idea of splitting it up, when we were tasked with the job of doing something for a new fire station, we were told, hey, this is going to be the cost. So you look at the cost and you scale it, right? Chief, what do you need? Honestly, let's go to an operational-only fire station. That's what we need right now. The idea came up of using Freeman Street. It is going to be a 100-year-old building for the town. I've heard demolish it. If it can be brought back and done really nice inside and brought back to the facade, why would the town of Stoughton want to get rid of a building that was once the crown jewel, right? It also makes it easier. There is staff, there are contractors that get in their car, drive over to Central Street, try to find a parking space in that parking lot, rather than bring some foot traffic to downtown. We're going to take off 2 bays off Freeman Street. That's going to open up parking for not only us, but for nights and weekends, right? I think that, what's the other option? Destroy it, sell it to somebody, have another another contractor come in and build something else. To me, there's some things in Stoughton that are just, I don't know, culture that I'd like to hold on to personally, and I think others would. And I think doing the downtown part of it, being part of that and getting the foot traffic down there makes sense to me.
Thank you, Peter. Excuse me, Chief, and thank you, Peter. Is there a third question for the Chief? If not, we're going to move on to legal. Is there a third question for the Chief? Hearing none. Thank you, Chief. This is Brian Winter, our legal counsel, who has been involved with the project from the very beginning. He'll be taking questions from everybody after his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter, and good evening, everybody. As Mr. Coulter mentioned, I'm Brian Winter, Town Council's office from Mead, Tallerman, and Costa. And I'm going to mention a couple things about sort of the fundamentals from my perspective. So that's just the legal perspective of some of the work that we've done on this. So as I think you all know, I've been working with the town manager's work group here, which is essentially this group up here. And I mentioned it's the town manager's work group because unlike a subcommittee of a board like the select board, a town manager or a mayor's working group is not a public meeting. So there is a distinction between a subcommittee and a work group. That's an important one. And through that work group, my office has been instructed to and has been charged with undertaking a number of things, including most fundamentally the acquisition of the subject property. So to refresh everyone's memory, the authority to do this goes back to December 6, 2021, and there was a motion made at town meeting. That motion was amended to include some very important language, and I'm just going to read it here, although this is, of course, on file with the town clerk's office. And that language says, to authorize the select board on such terms and conditions as the board deems appropriate to acquire by gift, purchase, or eminent domain the parcel or parcels of land identified as 400 Prospect Street. So that's what town meeting authorized the board to do. On another related issue, a debt exclusion went to the voters, and sometime later, on February 1st, 2022, that initiative passed. And so with those two sources of authority, the town charged my office to conduct A, diligence as to the property, and B, to effectuate the acquisition of that property. So there was a thorough title exam done through a third-party professional insured title exam company, and we got an opinion of title. We then went to engage with the prospective seller of that property. For various reasons, the seller of that property was unable to consummate a sale with the town. And so in accordance with a town meeting vote, the select board elected to obtain the property through eminent domain, as it was authorized to do. And I will give you the exact date, on April 29th, 2022, the board issued an order, and this is recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and obtained the property through eminent domain and awarded damages by virtue of that taking. And I'm sure for most people, you remember a basic principle of government law is no takings without compensation, right? And so the board awarded damages. The damages were in the exact amount as the price that had been negotiated for the purchase. At that point, the town became the owner of the property. A taking wipes out the prior title and creates a new chain of title, in this case, in the town's name. So for all intents and purposes, the town owned the property on that date and continues to. Shortly thereafter, although it wasn't necessary, the town found that it was beneficial and something that would support the project. The town also obtained, at no charge to the town, a grant of easement, and that easement became a matter of record and became a property right held by the town on February 3rd, 2023. And so that's also a matter of record. So these things are all available either at the clerk's office or at the Registry of Deeds. Clerk's office is obviously here, and the Registry of Deeds can be accessed online free of charge to anyone who wishes to look at them. So those are the legal fundamental principles about how the town obtained ownership and how it's perfected that ownership of the property and its rights to develop on the property. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate it. Are there any questions for legal counsel? Please feel free to raise your hand. Yes, sir. Please state your name.
Can we get him a microphone?
Yes, there's one right here.
Thank you. How you doing? On the litigation, you referred to compensation to the owner. Who was the owner, and what was the compensation amount?
Thank you, Mr. DeFelice. I hope everyone could hear that question since your microphone kind of clicked on and off for me, but I heard it. So the question was, what happened to the money? Correct?
No, the question is, the compensation, you didn't mention the dollar amount of the compensation, and who was the compensation paid to? Because I asked that because for the last year or so, or maybe longer, there's been a question of who owned the property. I guess before the town took it, I think there were like at least three entities that wanted the property. Or I should say claimed ownership of the property.
Correct. So the dollar figure, excuse me, is $1.150 million. So $1,150,000 was awarded. The money is sitting in an interest-bearing account held by the treasurer's office of town. And so that came as a result of, as you mentioned, a piece of litigation that arose in this process. And because there were various parties all claiming to have an ownership interest or a right that hasn't been decided by the courts yet, the town made the decision, and there's a statutory basis for this, that when there are quote-unquote owners unknown, we have the right to put the money in an interest-bearing account in the name of the treasurer. So one more thing on that. Out of an abundance of caution, I asked the select board for authority to approach the court and all the parties to that litigation, and I asked the court for its blessing on depositing those funds with the treasurer's office to give all the parties in that case an opportunity to object or state their piece. And so there was a hearing on that matter, and the court issued an order instructing me to deposit those funds with the Treasury. So they remain there, and on a periodic basis, we issue a statement of accounts to all the parties in the court. Thank you,
My
sir.
last question is that you make it sound like it's a done deal. I guess it is. You're the attorney, not me. But what prompted the $1.2 million price tag? It doesn't, to me, that piece of property doesn't look like it's worth that kind of money. But how'd you establish it, the amount?
The price was determined through various conversations with the select board, the town manager's office, through procurement efforts, and through the appraisals that were obtained and the assessment values that were obtained. And a price was determined, and it was 1.15.
However, you had mentioned earlier that the price was determined by, I think you said the owner at that time, because that was the asking price of the sale.
The award of damages for the taking was determined by the Board of Selectmen in consultation with the town manager.
And I guess my last question actually is, it's still under litigation, so if it's basically a done deal, what's being now, the litigation being continued? Well, what's the litigation for now? If the town owns the property, isn't the game over?
We're not a defendant or a plaintiff in that litigation, so I don't think I'm in a good position to comment on what they're litigating over. We're not a party in interest, if you will, to that case.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Mr. DeFelice, if I may, later on in the presentation, under the procurement heading, there will be information on prices, values, assessments, and appraisals. So we'll have more information for you later on in this presentation.
Thank you. And Mr. Town Manager, I appreciate the fact of you having this meeting for all the people in the town.
Thank you.
And looking at the list of upcoming meetings, that's the way it should be run. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for, yes, sir, please state your name. And then we'll go to,
Leo Fay, Shirley Road. On your interest-bearing account, I'm just curious, that interest, will that go to the town or will that go to the property owners once it's resolved?
Those funds are being held by order of the court, And so we can't touch them until the court gives me instructions. And so I won't know the answer to that question until the litigation's resolved. And my expectation is that we will receive an order or a judgment from the court, and it'll direct us to take certain action. And then we'll know the answer to your question.
Peter, last of the three questions, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Peter Banis, Precinct 2. I've been documenting things for the last year. I appreciate Mr. Coulter having this public meeting. I've been asking for a year just to have a public discussion, and we never could get it. My main question is, we spent a lot of money in that town meeting book, 172 pages. We analyzed everything at 400 Prospect Street. Park Street had a higher positive rating, wasn't by much, 19 point something to 18 point something. And then they said, we're not going to take it because of the price. So my main concern is if eminent domain actually does away with any of that protection the citizens and taxpayers had from those 9 points. And I did ask Mr. Winter if we could see the law. The interpretation of the law apparently is why we have so many lawyers, and that you have different opinions from different lawyers, and that's why they're lawyers. So my question is it in fact sensible for the taxpayers and the citizens and the Prospect Street residents to just accept this when there's been no negative factors ever publicly discussed about Prospect Street? So does the eminent domain, Mr. Winter, does the eminent domain just tell the town, do away with those 9 points, or is that just something that was done? Thank you.
Mr. Manager, through you to the speaker, I think the question is more related to site selection. And so I think I'm going to defer to the professionals who are here who can maybe speak to that point.
So there is more information on that, Peter, coming up under procurement. I don't think we speak to the scoring, but we did look at, in this analysis, the offered price that was offered by the seller as a percentage, their sale price as a percentage of the assessed value, and then we compare them together. And so there is more data we're going to give you in response to that question.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Mr. Winter.
Okay, the next question happens to be procurement. Fran?
Hi, I'm Fran Brutnitti, the procurement officer for the town, and we did an RFP.
Fran, is your speaker on? Can you hear Fran? No. Hear Fran.
Okay, so the speakers for online, you got to project your voice for out there.
We couldn't even hear you on this. Out here.
Hi, my name is Fran Brutnitti. I'm the procurement officer for the town of Stoughton. As mentioned, we went out to bid. We did an RFP for site selection. We had a response due date of April 30th, and we did receive one response. The response was from 850 Park Street. Their amount that they proposed was $2.4 million, $2,400,000. And we, part of the process is we review the response, the document, and the assessed value in FY21 was $457,900. On June 5th, the owner of the property withdrew their response. So that bid was over. We brought it to the town manager and to the select board, and we did decide to go out to bid again for site selection. The second site selection was the responses were due on July 30th. As the first bid, we were familiar with 400 Prospect Street. I'm sorry, Park Street. We were familiar with them. And then we received, on July 30th, we received two packages. The first package was for 400 Prospect Street. The response proposal came in at $1,150,000. It was assessed at FY22 assessed value was $829,800. And then we received a package from 850 Park Street. In that package, they had two proposals, which was legal. Their first proposal was for all four of their lots, similar to the first bid or proposal. The amount for the first four lots, $1,900,000. The assessed value in FY22, so this, because it was July 30th, it was FY22, came in at $489,900. The second option was a carved-out piece of property. It was not the 4 lots. I couldn't get the assessed value for that carved-out piece because there was no assessed value. We didn't have one. But it was, if you compared it to the 489, it was above. The assessed value was a lot higher than their proposed price. The review committee, we reviewed the documents, and both properties, the 400 Prospect Street, full property, was rated as advantageous, and the 850 Park Street, the full 4 properties, was rated as advantageous. We did not rate the carved-out pieces advantageous. We looked at the prices, and the recommendation was to move forward with 400 Prospect Street. It was the lowest price, and it was rated advantageous.
Thank you, Fran. Any questions for our procurement officer? And what Fran, we decided not to get into is this procurement law, which I went to school for and Fran went to school for, is highly regulated. We don't get to just put it up for sale or put it up for bid like we would if it was our personal dwelling. This section of Massachusetts state law requires very specific processes for taking or accepting bids. And at any time, if anybody wants to come in and meet with Fran and myself and go through the procurement process, which is somewhat complex, I invite you to do so. There was a question right here. Yes, sir. Please state your name.
Hello. Okay. Greg Pokrack, Prospect Street. Fran, I just had a question, should be a brief question regarding the RFP process. Prior to the RFP being submitted, the town hired Riverhawk Environmental to investigate 400 Prospect Street. How does that happen without us knowing an RFP is coming through?
Well, we issued the RFP. The RFP was before Riverhawk was even thought about. We had heard that Prospect Street, the owner of Prospect Street, was interested. They asked for documents. We sent them documents. We actually sent Park Street the documents. They didn't request the second documents from the second RFP, but I sent them to them out of courtesy. I didn't know, if they knew we were going out to bid again, if they read the newspaper or checked the website. So out of courtesy, I did send them to those. So we knew that we didn't know. We're just doing our due diligence for the RFP, for the quote, and we just said this might be a potential property. Might be. We did not know who was going to submit a bid.
If I may add to that, there was a request for proposal for a site assessment. I don't believe the site assessment was conducted.
Oh, God, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The proposal, the quote, it was a request for quote, and that was contingent on if we moved forward, if we received a bid, if it had to go to town meeting. There were a lot of contingencies that would have had to be met.
Okay, it sounds to me, again, not knowing, that it seems like someone had some inside information that an RFP was coming through on this site. Did we ask for any other quotations for any other properties, or was it just Prospect Street?
I know the engineering department is going to explain that a little bit more, but the first RFP for the site selection, they withdrew their bid. We were familiar with that property. So we did not issue another, we did not request a quote for that. But a quote is not a guarantee of purchase. It's just a quote. We were just doing our due diligence on seeing budget-wise, how much would a 21E cost?
Yeah, I just, again, trying to learn here, and, when I see things that look a little bit strange to me, I ask questions because I didn't realize the town would go out to ask for a quote on a specific property before the RFP was received by the town.
So I would like to speak to that, because when I hear in terms of the public procurement process, the terms inside information send you to jail. It's that clear. All they did, and I wasn't here, but I have the same degree that Pam has in public procurement,
They knew Prospect Street, the RFP had already come out. Prospect Street had already expressed interest. Park Street wasn't expressing interest. She still sent out the package to them. All she did is say, if you bid, if to an environmental, I was in the environmental affairs business for 40 years, and I'm only 35. What they did is said, if they bid, we need to know what the proposal's going to be for 21E. There's nothing out of the ordinary about that. If this land is for sale, we would like to know what it would cost for us to do a 21E if they're the winning bidder. And they expressed to us, they sent documents, they asked questions, that they were going to be bidding on it. All Fran was doing was getting out in front of the process, which is her job. Otherwise, it may be a month, a month delay just getting an environmental contractor to give a price, and another month delay to give them a contract, negotiate a contract. So the same documents that were sent to Prospect Street were sent to Park Street owners, and those are the only two we knew about.
But we didn't get the quote on.
I'm sorry?
But we didn't get the quote from Riverhawk on Park Street.
Park Street didn't respond to our request. One more question on procurement. Yes, sir. We'll do two. No, please go ahead first, sir. State your name.
Paul Carter, I'm one of the owners of 850 Park Street. I'd just like to clarify the whole procurement. Joel Walk, who was running the building committee, got in touch with me and said 850 Park Street would be a great site for the fire station. Will you be willing to submit your property for the RFP? So we got the RFP, put in the paperwork. We were the only bidder. I was here with Fran and with Joel, and we were the only bidder the first time for the entire piece of property. There's 6 acres there. It's the most 300 feet on 27. It's the most available parcel in the town. I said at that time, what's the next step? They said, well, there'll be a meeting, and then the selectmen will make a decision. At that selectmen's meeting, they disbanded the building committee. So we were in limbo. We didn't know what was going to happen. We've had other people almost on a monthly basis approach us. So we withdrew our proposal because even to this day, 2 years later, we've never got an answer from the town on our first submittal because the building committee was disbanded. And then the second time around, we put 2 bids in. One substantially less for the entire property because the way we were thinking is in the future the town would have extra land to add another building or something else in the future. Trying to subdivide that land wasn't worth it. So you took the lowest bid. It's no sour grapes, but all I hear is we withdrew. We withdrew because we never got an answer from the selectmen or the building committee the first time around, and we were the only bidder. So that's where we stand, but I just wanted to come here tonight and clarify that for everybody.
We really appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Moderator, you'll be the last question on this issue.
Thank you.
Here you go, Bob.
Bob Mullen, 19 Clover Lane. My question is, I probably could ask it anybody here, any speakers, and the thing that bothers me is, this is from day one here, is how come this working committee essentially is not a public meeting? It should be transparent, it should be on TV, it should be public minutes, so we probably wouldn't have to have these questions. A lot of these questions we can watch on TV or follow up with a lot of the meeting minutes, see what's going on. I just think it should be transparent, like we want all government to be transparent as much as possible. And since you're going to be spending our money, these meetings ought to be transparent. I know you're not required like public body, but still, regardless of that, you are spending the taxpayers' money of Stoughton. This meeting, I would recommend to be a public meeting. So when the working group meets, it should be on TV. It doesn't have to be a public hearing. You don't have to have the public speak or ask questions, but it should be in the public eye. It should be an open meeting. And I really think It should be on TV, and you should have public minutes. Like I went to the website the other day, I didn't see any public minutes on this, on your meetings, on this working committee meetings. I think it's, for me, as a person who lives in town and paying my taxes, it's mandatory. You know, it may not be legally required because it's not a public body, but still, you're spending our money. And I think the townspeople want to see be in a public meeting. That's all we ask. Put it on TV. If you meet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it can still be on TV. It can be shown later on, be shown numerous times. To me, it's not transparent enough. So, I mean, I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything, but I'm just saying, if it's not out there in the public eye, anybody can throw stones at it because it's just not out there. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. The next issue, we're moving right along, is issue number 6, site assessment, and it's going to be addressed by our senior engineer, Mark Tisdale. Thank you, Mark.
Good evening, everybody. Mark Tisdale, Town Engineer, Director of Development Services. Tonight, I'll be talking about the site assessment portion of the presentation. We'll be covering the initial site assessment, the process that occurred when we did the wetland delineation, the existing conditions survey, the 21E environmental assessment, the findings of the geotechnical investigations, there was a few, site design and permitting that occurred for the project, the off-site traffic mitigation that got reviewed and approved through the planning board, and the rodent and pest control issues on the property. Next slide. All right. Originally, the town manager gave a directive to the engineering department to take a look at the property that was submitted, 400 Prospect Street, to evaluate the property based on the building program that was at hand at that point in time, the building footprint, the parking, the maneuver area required for the fire trucks, utilities, and stormwater management areas. Those are all the areas that take up room on the property. So it was our job to take a look at those aspects of the property. Little background work that we had to do before we actually got into that was look at the property. The property consisted of 6 parcels totaling 8.56 acres total. The area consisted of upland areas, wetland areas, woods, brush, pavement, and building. There was a building on a commercial establishment on the property. There was a contiguous upland area of 5.3 acres, which means that's the area of upland that was on the east side of the stream, contiguous to where we would want to build. There are more uplands other than 5.3 acres. The area where the building would be, where the existing building is, and where the proposed building will eventually be, is about 10 feet higher in elevation than the surrounding wetland areas. That's an important elevation to talk about because there's been a lot of claims about it being put in a swamp, and it's obviously false information. There's existing impervious area on the property that consists of the driveway, the parking lot, and the building of about 30,400 square feet. There's also wetland resource areas on the property, like there are on a lot of available properties today that are left to build on. The wetland resource areas consist of intermittent streams. An intermittent stream is a stream that doesn't necessarily flow all year around, 365 days a year. If it dries up for 5 or 6 days at a time, it's not intermittent. A bordering vegetative wetland, which borders the intermittent stream. It's a wetland area that's next to the stream. And there's a 100-year floodplain because you do have a stream. From a stormwater management standpoint, the existing commercial establishment is a building with a parking lot. There's no stormwater management. It rains, cars are parked there, dripping oils and greases on the pavement. It runs off the pavement and goes into the stream without being treated at all. That's what the property consists of currently. There's no catch basins, and there's no detention basins, things like that capture and treat stormwater. It's not there. Nor should it be. The property was built, probably a while back before all those regulations were in place, but that's a fact. There's a 48-inch RCP culvert where the stream crosses the driveway. It's reinforced concrete pipe. That's what that stands for. It's a large pipe that carries water from one side of the driveway to the other side of the driveway. The other utilities available to the site are gas, overhead electric, sewer, and water. Next slide. All right, you're probably all familiar with this plan. This was, I believe, in the town meeting book with the article. This was a conceptual plan. I emphasize concept plan. There's no design done with this. This was based on the GIS information that I just showed you. GIS information is very approximate information. It's the best available information we have as a town to look at. So we put the building footprint, the parking area, the maneuver areas, and as you can see even on the plan, I believe it says possible stormwater management areas, because it's all conceptual. These things can move. Once you actually hire a civil engineer, you get a survey done, things like that, things move around a little bit because you understand the property better by doing a survey. The preliminary building program that you see here consisted of 26,000 square feet of building with dormitory area, 5 truck bays, and 1 service bay. There's a sufficient area for maneuvering in front of the building. That's the big gray area for easy departure. There's adequate site access egress to the town roadway network, which is Prospect Street. I think actually on the July parade, we had 5 trucks parked over there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but they were parked there. They exited, no problem, getting out of the property. I was there, I saw that. 32 parking spaces at that time for the program. There's also the available stormwater management areas we referred to earlier, and there's adequate water, sewer, gas, and electric. We knew there was adequate water on Prospect Street because our water department already had a project in place for upgrading the water line on Prospect Street. Next slide, please. All right, this is a little more detail. If I sound like an engineer, it's because I am one. But this is going to be a little engineering here. This is the wetland delineation and existing conditions survey that we did. Before you design anything, you have to understand the shape of the property and the elevation of the property. So you do a topographic survey of the property. This was performed by Riverhawk. They did an existing conditions plan. As you can see on the plan, the orange line around the outside here is the boundary of the property. The blue lines are the 100-year floodplain. In between that is the 100-year floodplain. In the middle is that stream I was talking to you about, the blue area. The dark green lines are the bordering vegetative wetlands, the edge of it. And then there's also a purple line shown, that's a 100-foot buffer zone to the wetlands. Any work done within 100 feet of a wetland needs to be permitted through the Conservation Commission. So the topographic survey confirmed that there's about a 10-foot elevation difference between where the building's going to be and the wetland. So it kind of confirmed the input that we saw from the GIS database that we have on site. So that was good. As part of the survey, we collect information on the wetland line, which is probably the most important thing from a site civil standpoint, design standpoint. The way a wetland delineation is done, you hire a certified wetland scientist to flag wetlands. You actually have to they go out there with an auger, they auger the soil. Based on the color of the soil and the type of soil, hydric soils, based on the vegetation near that soil, and if it's connected hydraulically to a bordering vegetative wetland or stream, that determines a wetland line. It's a very accurate, precise way of doing it. I'm also a certified soil evaluator, and they teach you exactly how to determine, how high the water table comes up in a soil based on the color marks in the soil. It's a science. You've got to be certified to do that. That's what a wetland scientist also does. So it's very detailed. Essentially, when you drive by sites and you see pink flags on the vegetation every 30 or 40, 50 feet or so, when you're driving by on the highway or where new projects are, that's because the wetland scientist hung a flag on the piece of vegetation of where the wetland line is. After that flag's hung, a professional land survey goes out there and locates that flag with that kind of accuracy. So now you go from the accuracy of a GIS map, which can be 5 or 10 feet off, maybe more, maybe less, to survey precision of about, a tenth of an inch or less for where the wetland line is. And that tells you exactly where the wetland line is. And the green line on the map is the bordering vegetative wetland line. Next slide, please. After we got that done, or concurrently, I believe, we had Riverhawk do the 21E environmental site assessment, which is part of our due diligence. When we're going to buy a property, we want to make sure it doesn't contain hazardous waste or issues like that. So part of the environmental assessment is a phase 1 environmental assessment, and we also did a phase 2 limited subsurface assessment. The phase 1 ESA, I'm not going to memorize this, I'm going to read it because it says it best on the screen here. It involved a search of available governmental, real estate, and commercial use records which help identify potential or existing environmental contamination liabilities associated with the property. The Phase 1 ESA also involved an inspection of the property to visually observe and record any obvious environmental conditions that may exist in conformance with ASTM policies and protocols set forth by Mass DEP. The Phase 2 portion of this, we actually excavated 10 test pits with a backhoe. They dig the soil, they dig it down about 8 to 10 feet roughly. They get where the water table is, and they actually take samples and they send it to a lab. One of those test pits was right near where the underground storage tank was located, if you all remember that tank. Part of the phase 1 assessment noted that there was a 500-gallon underground storage tank, that it was intact, there was no leaks that were identified, the tank was removed as recommended. There was no other recognizable environmental conditions as presented by Riverhawk. Next slide. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to the Assistant Town Engineer, Craig Horsfall, to talk about the geotechnical investigation.
Thanks, Mark. Craig Horsfall, the Assistant Town Engineer. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about our investigations on the site so that we had a better understanding of what the site consisted of, from a few different standpoints. The first, set of test pits and borings that we did out there were from a geotechnical standpoint. So we were trying to get an established, allowable bearing pressure of the soil so that we could understand how to design the foundation for the building. PES Associates was hired and performed the test pits and the borings in July of 2022. Following that, we had our civil engineer that was hired by the team. It was Niche Engineering, and they were performing an evaluation of the soil texture of the site and to establish the groundwater table elevation so that they could design the stormwater management system. It's very important that we understand the texture, so if it's a very sandy soil, it's going to absorb water a little bit quicker. If it's more of a clay soil, it's going to be a bit slower, so we really have to evaluate, what type of soil we're dealing with there for stormwater. And then of utmost importance is to establish where that high groundwater table elevation is. Mark alluded to that a little earlier about the staining in the soil and getting that record high water elevation. In total, 2 borings and 33 test pits have been performed on the site. If you go to the next slide, please. And you can see here on this illustration that we've really covered the buildable area on the site, so we have a really firm understanding of what's going on with the soil profile in that buildable area. Next slide. Next, I'm going to talk about the site design and permitting process. This plan that you have up in front of you now is a colored version of the current layout. And you can see that this layout is a little bit different than the plan that was shown in the town meeting book from when the project was voted on at town meeting, and that's because we had a little bit more information. We now know specifically what wetland resource areas are available on site, where the property boundaries are, what the existing topography is, and the soils, so forth. We just have more information. And based on that information, we've tweaked the design. So the building got rotated a little bit. It's pretty much 90 degrees to Prospect Street at this point. And that's to allow for access off of Prospect Street up to the maneuver area in front of the bays here at the front of the building. And if you were to drive past those bays, for passenger cars, there's a parking field beyond that. The site is accessible from Prospect Street, where the utility connections will be made. So there's sewer available out on Prospect Street, water, gas, and overhead electric. Next slide, please. So the permits that are required through the local government are a notice of intent filing with the Conservation Commission and full site plan review through the Planning Board. So an NOI was filed with Conservation, and they're concerned with review of the wetland line. So they really review that thoroughly. The Commission and the Environmental Affairs Officer take a look at that line in the field, and they'll evaluate each flag and make sure that they agree with the consultant who originally flagged it, that flag is in the proper location. I don't think there were any flags that were adjusted throughout the evaluation for this delineation. And the Conservation Commission is going to review the project for the impacts within the buffer zone. So within 100 feet of that flagged wetland resource area, that's their jurisdiction for review. And they're looking at the stormwater management, grading, and so forth, and how this might impact the wetlands. And they want to be sure that the plan mitigates any impacts as best as possible. They take a hard look at the stormwater management and make sure that the peak rate of runoff does not exceed what is there on the existing condition. They look at water quality and make sure that our stormwater management design meets DEP guidelines and local bylaw. And so the system on site does treat water quality much better than what's happening today. As Mark stated, the existing site has no stormwater management facilities whatsoever. This site will be designed with all modern facilities, so deep sump catch basins, a vortechnics unit to further separate out particulars, particles from the stormwater, and it'll be very clean by the time it's either discharged to the wetland area or recharged to the groundwater table. They also were very concerned with the culvert that's it's existing and it's in place. It's a 48-inch RCP culvert, as Mark had mentioned earlier, and we wanted to be sure that this culvert would be able to carry the stormwater adequately across the site, and that the roadway wouldn't flood out when you need the fire department most, right? So we did an evaluation on the 500-year storm, and this culvert can carry that without overtopping the roadway. So that's above and beyond most analysis, which stop at the 100-year storm. So we wanted to be extra cautious with this particular item. There was also some concern with the structural integrity of the culvert. Visually, it looks great. We've looked at it. It's nice and straight, it's solid and everything. But we had the design engineers take a look at that, and they did a structural analysis, and they felt confident that it was a solid pipe and would withstand the traffic loads above. However, as an added precaution, the design does include I believe it's a 5-inch concrete slab to be constructed above the culvert to give it a little bit more of an insurance policy that we won't have any structural issues moving into the future. From the planning board standpoint, they're a little more concerned with how the building's situated, the parking layout, the on-site circulation, and things of that nature. They also review the site grading, stormwater management, and utility connections, but then they dive into landscaping and lighting design as well. Next is traffic mitigation. I'm going to hand that over to our traffic consultant, John Diaz from GPI.
Hi, again, for the record, John Diaz with GPI. So we were brought on board to look at the traffic associated with the proposed fire station off of Prospect Street. That included looking at the 3 intersections, Pleasant Street, Walnut Street, and the Park Street intersection. Next. So the first thing we wanted to look at was the access drive itself to see if we had adequate sight distance so that the vehicles could safely egress from the site and also safely enter the site. As you know, Prospect Street's pretty much a straight shot. We can see to the south, well down beyond the Park Street intersection, coming up Park Street, and looking to the north on Prospect Street, we can see well to the north, well exceeding any of the minimum criteria that we need. We have in excess of over 800 feet of clear sight lines at that driveway. Next. So at the Park Street intersection, we got traffic counts in the beginning of the year in January. We went out manually counted the 3 intersections. At that intersection, under existing conditions, there's less than a 5-second delay making a turn or exiting out of Prospect Street. The impacts of the proposed site really have no impact on it. You're talking an additional 1 vehicle southbound added to that queue during either the morning or afternoon. Keep in mind, it's a fire station, so it's not really generating any traffic. Turnover, I believe, is a shift of 8 in the morning, and that's every 24 hours. And the vehicles themselves are making the emergency calls on average probably 1 to 2 an hour. So the volumes at the intersection there don't warrant any type of signalization for the intersection. That is a state-controlled intersection, so even if it did warrant signalization, we would have to go through the state, and they are very concerned about having the minimum volumes required to meet signalization, and this one does not. So what we're doing out there in terms of the proposed mitigation at this intersection to make sure things are more visible, we're going to restripe the existing stop line and crosswalks so that all the pavement markings are new and more visible. We'll add a new stop sign. We're also going to have additional signing for the fire station itself, the emergency warning signs coming up Prospect Street, Prospect Street as you come northbound, and restriping the double yellow center line and fog lines there, or edge lines, to provide better visibility. Next slide. At the fire station itself, we're going to have an emergency signal at the fire stations. It's similar to some of the signals you may have seen at railroad crossings. There'll be a mast arm out over the street. It will be dark until an emergency call comes in, and then it will flash similar to a railroad signal and go solid red to stop the traffic on Prospect Street so the vehicles can safely exit the site. What else we got? We talked about the volumes there. The majority of the traffic, 65%, is expected to go south to the Park Street intersection. So the majority of the traffic won't be going to the north along Prospect Street, but will be going to the south. As I mentioned, the sight lines coming out of that driveway are excellent. You really don't find that too often. The other real benefit to this, as the chief mentioned, is by right now they're coming out in downtown, and that's coming out between 2 signals and interrupting the traffic flow downtown every time a call comes through. So you're going to get a benefit off-site downtown by not interrupting those signals as much, which is really unusual for a site to provide benefits unrelated to where it is. Next intersection. Next. At Walnut Street, again, we're talking less than 1 second delay going through that intersection. Really no change in operations, at most 1 vehicle to the northbound queue. The mitigation there is we'll do the same thing. We'll upgrade all the signing and striping to provide better visibility. New stop signs, always stop signs there for that approach. And then finally next slide, sorry. At the Prospect and Pleasant Street intersection, We're going to be putting, again, new striping there. Again, there's very little impacts. One vehicle, about 3-second delays increase at the intersection. New striping and new signs there. Next slide. One of the big discussions that came up was the ability of the vehicles to negotiate through the intersection, particularly the Park Street intersection. We modeled through CAD that you have design templates with 2 vehicles, even 3 vehicles stopped there. A fire truck can still get by. It's about 24 feet of width at that traffic island. We ran templates through all the other intersections, and the vehicles can all safely go through the intersections without encroaching on other lanes. Is it pest control?
Thanks, John. Good job. All right, it's my job to talk about the rodent control here. Very quick. As you all know, the building that was out there got demoed about 2 weeks ago, I believe, right? In that time frame. Part of the conditions through our specs were to put bait traps there 3 weeks prior to demo to get rid of any rodents that were there. It's going to be the contractor's responsibility to maintain the bait traps and pest control throughout construction. Since that point in time, since the building's been demoed, since all the traps have been there, our Board of Health has gotten no complaints with rodents or pest control out there. I'm sure during construction, there may be some of that, but it should be reduced substantially because of this project. It's actually, in many ways, a project like this is great because a lot of times we get complaints for different types of rodents and rats in different areas of town. But because we actually own this property, we can be a good neighbor and actually help address the issue for everybody surrounding the property. Thank you.
Well, I know that was very detailed-oriented, and for those of you, I've been in the environmental field for 40 years, and I don't understand all of it, so feel free to ask whatever questions you like and using whatever understanding you have of the issue. So we'll begin with Cynthia.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street, Town Meeting Representative. I'm a little concerned, and it may just be a typo. Unfortunately, your presentation isn't paginated, but it's under the traffic mitigation, Prospect Street at Fire Station Drive. And under the impacts, the very last impact, sightlines in excess of 800 feet, well over requirements of 45 miles an hour. I thought that Prospect Street was thickly settled.
30. It is. That's not what the speed is out there. That's what the sight lines are safe enough. If someone was driving 45 miles an hour, they would still be able to have adequate sight lines at the drive. The speed study we showed out there was the speeds between 35 and 40 on average.
No, my brother used to be stationed out there at Leach Street, 8 o'clock every morning to catch the speeders on Prospect Street. I don't know if they still do that. He's retired. The other thing is, I don't drive, so I'm not an expert. But on Park Street, if you stay on Park Street as it curves around and Prospect enters, isn't that a 30-mile zone?
Park Street itself?
No, the curve part.
I'm not sure what the posted for regulatory speed is.
Park Street? Not 30.
When you're on Park and you stay on Park, but you hit the curve, isn't that 30 miles?
20. No, I don't think so. Probably 40.
I don't know the regulated speed there, and it could be, typically what would happen is you might have a regulated speed, black on white speed of 35 or 40 miles an hour, but you would have an advisory placard with the speed, which may be even down to 25 going around that corner. I don't know directly.
Thank you both.
Next question. Somebody over here had their hand up. Peter.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. On the traffic, you displayed it as coming out of the proposed station onto Prospect heading south. So you're heading towards Park Street. You went and you had 3 vehicles stacked up. You pointed out that the fire truck could pass it on the right-hand side. Now, I've always been taught that when you see a fire truck, you pull to the immediate right. So my question is that going to become a problem, number one? Number two, is there any money that's going to be set aside so you're not coming before town meeting 2-3 years from now looking for traffic lights?
First question, no, it won't make a difference. You have 24 feet of width, so it doesn't matter whether the car's on the right side or the left side. It's 24 feet of width, so you have plenty of width for the vehicles to bypass. In terms of the coming back for a signal at future time, we don't know what the future is. I can tell you right now that that intersection does not warrant a signal. It is under state control, so whatever happens to that intersection is outside the realm of the town. So if the state came back in 2 years and said, we're concerned and want to have a signal there may be a signal there. But right now, it does not warrant a signal, and we would not be able to put one in.
No, the question was, is there money going to be put aside just in case? So that way there.
If a signal goes in there, it would be with the responsibility of the state. It's a state-owned intersection.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing, as far as this site location, what was this parcel land zoned for in the very beginning before?
Peter, that question is, if I heard you right, what is the zoning of the property?
Yeah, what was the zoning of this property before the town took it by eminent domain?
The zoning was and still is a residential zone.
So it was residential, so the zoning does have to change for something like this, or?
No, this is an allowed use in a residential zone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. John Anzavino, I'm on the Finance Committee, Precinct 4 Rep. Question to you, Mark. Did the driveway get moved outside of the floodplain? Because it was shown in there to begin with. With the taking of with the easement, did that get the driveway a little straighter and out of the floodplain?
The driveway, it's still all in the floodplain. The driveway was in the floodplain, we just shifted it over. That whole area between...
Not what's shown on the map. It shows the red or the pink area. It showed both sides, but where the driveway was, it did not show within the floodplain.
Could you go back to the plan? Let me pull that plan up, Mr. Anzavino.
It's right here.
Yeah, I just want to pull it up on the screen real quick. Can you just go up? Up. Keep on going. Up. Keep on going up. Up.
Way up, way up.
Yep. Keep on going. We're almost there. Okay, right there. All right. This is probably the best plan to show you where, no, actually.
No, it was the other one.
Keep on going up one. Yep, sorry. Another one. Keep on going. Right there. Yep.
One more. There you go.
But, this was the old conceptual plan, John.
All right.
There's more
the
current.
floodplain was bigger?
There's more. This is not a survey plan. The more current information is on the next plan.
All right.
So remember, one is from GIS information, which is approximate. One is from a survey. So once we actually survey the location of the stream, now we know exactly where the floodplain is from that location. On this plan, it's the blue line here. So everything in this area, in between that area, is the floodplain. So the driveway going from here, where is it? From here to here, it's still in the floodplain.
You will be in the floodplain.
It was before, and it still is, yes.
All right. The other question I had for you, if you will, You had the environmental assessment done and the survey, but my question is, there was an outstanding order on this property from the Conservation Committee, and there was issues with the, we'll say, the presumed owner at the time. There was issue with the Conservation Committee, which they never showed up for the Conservation Committee, I don't know, but when we had our hearings, we asked if this was any problems on this property, and we were told that the agent had no issues with this property. I was just wondering how, with the next outstanding order and the issues that were going on at the time, a month after the original purchase, that this was just blown away, blown off like it was nothing.
That's a good question, John. I can't speak for the commission. I'm not obviously on the commission. But generally, the process is anytime a project is approved by the commission, at that point in time, anything that's outstanding on the property, an enforcement order, something like that, gets resolved with that approval. So in other words, if the enforcement order was clearing of vegetation within the buffer zone without a permit, well, by us submitting this project, we're working in the buffer zone, but we're asking for a permit, so it takes in that previous order as part of the approval.
All right, I was just curious why the town just ignored the two issues at the time, because we were told that.
I think our town council has something to add to that.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to maybe add a clarification. So Mark is speaking correctly. That's entirely accurate. So what happens with sort of wetlands enforcement is there's an enforcement order or notice of violation. That in and of itself is essentially like a warning letter. It doesn't have legal effect by itself unless and until the Conservation Commission goes to court or takes some action to enforce it. So it's essentially a warning, and that's all it is. So when you have something like that, and then another project comes along and seeks a permit and seeks to reshape and repurpose the land and addresses all the wetlands regulatory compliance issues that the commission identifies, it's essentially curative. So any of the concerns the Conservation Commission may have had on the property get baked into the permit application that's in front of them, and they all get addressed. And so if the commission sees fit to approve it, it approves it with the restoration and the curative work that's going to be done through that permit. So I think that's what Mark said.
I was just curious why at the Finance Committee meeting we were told there was no issues with the property when there actually were two at the time. That's the main point I'm making, all right? You talk transparency, but it was knocked aside. It wasn't brought up. It was asked, and we were told there were no issues on the property, and there were two. Thank you.
Other questions?
Hello. Greg Pokraka, Prospect Street. So just further to the flood zone, the next slide that shows where the building placement is going to be does not have the two flood zone lines. Could you sort of demonstrate on there with your hand maybe where the building is going to be in relation to the flood zone? Because it looks like it's going to be smack in the middle of that.
Building generally is up in this area. If you can remember, it was situated like this. It's up in the area. Most of it's outside the 100-year floodplain. I believe the building itself, Glenn, is outside the 100-year floodplain, if I'm correct. Something to point. I want to make a point on this. And this is a technical thing. The 100-year floodplain on here is mapped from FEMA flood maps without an elevation, which means every floodplain, as you can imagine, has to have an elevation it goes up to. It doesn't change the elevation. This flood map was taken from old information. We've done a new 500-year floodplain analysis, and there was a McGuire study from 1976 that also showed a new floodplain, all much lower, that do not map with that location. But since the FEMA floodplain maps kind of govern what you have to utilize at that point in time, that's the map. The map shows that location. That does not follow a specific contour. So the information we showed you with the pink and the blue for the 500-year and 100-year floodplain analysis, that's more accurate information of where flooding occurs on the property.
Thank you. Riverhawk, did they identify fill on this site? And what kind of depths? I've read everything from 6 to 8 feet of fill, including asphalt, brick, and other materials.
Yeah. There's varying depths of fill on the property. Yeah, I think it can go from, obviously there's none in the back of the property on the high end, and then it varies different depths. I've seen 3, 5, 6 feet of fill in different areas. I was on site for a couple of the test pits, and I can verify I saw about 3 or 4 feet of fill in a couple different spots.
Okay, and so the plan, maybe this is coming later, but the plan is to remove all of this illegal fill and bring in new fill to the site.
Some of the fill, that they've done test pits, they've taken a look at the fill. It's clean fill, structural fill, suitable for areas where the building is not going to be located. So where the building's going to be located, they're going to excavate that fill, they're going to utilize it on different parts of the property, and they're going to put clean fill where the building's going to be.
Okay. And just one last question. So the test pits revealed water at certain depths. Of course, because this is in the middle of a wetland. So at what depth, and is that of any concern for this project?
So water tables, as a site engineer, I learned this my first week on the job, co-oping for a civil engineering firm, are the most important thing. Everything else is determined by where the water table is. So for example, you go out there as a certified soil evaluator myself, you go out there, you dig a test pit. The water table isn't actually where you physically see the water, although it can be, but most of the time it is not. It's actually higher than that. It's this estimated seasonal high groundwater table that you use. It's where the water table historically comes the highest. What happens is it comes up to that elevation, stays there, it strips the soil of its natural color and leaves spots called redox in the soil, and then it goes back down. And that might only happen once every 5 or 10 years at those high water table elevations. So when we determine water table, it's actually at that highest point on the property. And on this property, it varies. The property slopes, it varies. It goes from 3 to 4 to 6 feet, depending on where you are on the property, so it varies. But it's that highest estimated seasonal high groundwater table, and most of the time, it's where the water isn't. The water is usually deeper than that.
So in your opinion, that's not a concern underneath the building where this is going to be?
It is definitely not a concern. I actually enjoy my job in this town. I like to retire here. So I want this to come out very well.
So, thank you.
I need to press the button or is it just? Ed Quigley, 256 Prospect Street. I have a question for the gentleman from GPI. When they did the traffic study, what is the rate of traffic currently on Prospect Street?
What are you referring to when you say the rate of traffic?
How many cars travel that half a mile in a 24-hour period on average?
Do you have a copy of the study? I don't have it with me. Give me a minute, I'll look it up.
Okay, thank you. It's actually a broader question. When this project was being studied in any site, was any consideration given to the impact to the neighborhood? Prospect Street is only a half a mile long. It's maybe, if you're lucky, 25 feet wide. And I know if a landscape truck parks on the side of the road, it's essentially a one-lane road. And I've seen that constantly all summer long. My concern is that someone talked about the benefit of moving the station out of the center because now the traffic won't get clogged up on the center. But it seems to me all the traffic that would go to North Stoughton for a fire emergency, would have to go up Prospect Street. Because that would be the quickest way and that would make sense. because the whole thing is timing. And I don't know if any consideration, I mean, people have looked at intersections, but the road itself is very narrow. And one previous speaker talked about the police collecting traffic tickets. It's like a raceway on the street, and everyone here knows that. And I just want to know if anything is being considered to mitigate that for the people who live there. It's a residential neighborhood. It's not a commercial neighborhood. As I said, the road is a little over a half a mile long. It's the reason it's posted at 30, even though they clocked it as everybody doing 40, 45.
So Dr. Quigley, could you just repeat your question concerning whether we have enough, were you questioning whether we have enough space to get by with your idea or with your scenario of a landscape truck?
Well, one of the things is landscape trucks park on the street all the time. Not for me, I do my own yard. But because of the narrowness of the street, one lane is completely blocked. Because on one side, there's no sidewalk they can pull on, so they're parked in the street. If traffic is heavy coming down Prospect, it's going to essentially block the road, because those cars can't pull over the right unless they're going up onto other people's property. Now, it has nothing to do with you guys. I'm looking, if anybody has looked at the bigger picture of what do we do to mitigate the impact of this in the neighborhood?
No, so you're just saying in a general sense, not really pertaining to emergency apparatus. I understand the concerns, and as everybody who lives in Stoughton knows, everywhere we run into the scenarios, and you know, and every road. I grew up on School Street, and it's a racetrack coming down over that hill. I live right opposite Drake Ave, right? Grew up there, so I swear people tried to see how much speed they could pick up as they came down the hill. I get it. We aside from your training of emergency vehicle operations that we go through, we run into this more than not. And as you can imagine, Freeman Street itself, if somebody parks opposite on the other side of the street of the fire station, the ladder truck cannot get out. And no, it doesn't matter how many signs we put out there or anything. They park there, the ladder truck cannot make the swing onto the street. So I think we're adaptive. I think we're patient, much more patient than I think some people may kind of perceive, because you do see us go by in a response type mode. But if the street is blocked, we wait. Just like when we pull up to the center and it's congested from one light to the other, there's nothing we're going to do to move that traffic other than make people nervous if we're on our sirens, or make people nervous like they have to get somewhere. So we'll honestly, we'll wait till the area is clear. Hopefully the people will stop beyond that landscape truck, and we'll be able to get by and respond to the call. You know, as far as a whole general, what consideration going into Prospect, I do not know what the town's plans are. I do not know. I know, like you had said in a previous meeting, since 1960 it's been an issue. There's been a lot of that and a lot of concerns on the roads. We were just dealing with Plain Street, where there was a really bad accident, you know, and people go right, you know, they fly coming from west towards Plain. There's a lot of concerns in town. All we can do is drive as safely and as carefully as possible and obey the rules.
Yeah. I'm not questioning.
Yep. Oh, I just didn't.
The skill or the concern.
I apologize if I didn't answer
the
your question.
firefighters. My question is, to the people who chose the site, did they look at the larger picture and what impact this has on traffic, quality of life on that half a mile strip of road? And I asked the question because when I looked at a copy of the traffic study, and that's why I asked, because I want to be sure that I was reading it correctly, because when I read it, it appeared there's 4,000 cars travel that in a 24-hour period, which seemed high to me.
It's
I don't
actually
know.
3,000, and it is over a 24-hour period.
3,000.
Yes.
So rough math would make it
So in the course of the peak hour, you have about 300 vehicles on the road. Going
300
both,
feet in an hour.
in the peak hour, going both directions, so basically 150 vehicles each direction, which is about 2 vehicles a minute at the worst point.
Okay, so
So a vehicle
my question is...
a vehicle every 30
is any-
seconds.
I mean, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. My question is, did anybody think about what impact this may have on a neighborhood that is already got too much traffic?
So
We're getting
to
300
answer your
vehicles
question,
in an hour on a half a mile residential street. I think somebody should take a look at that.
so what's that? So we did look at, that's exactly what we did. We looked at how much traffic the fire station would generate. As I said, there's a crew of 8 every morning that comes in. It's a 24-hour shift, so you have 8 vehicles essentially coming in at 8 o'clock in the morning for the shift. And then the only other traffic associated with the fire station is the calls, which is, I think the chief can back me up on this, I think we said about 1 to 2 calls an hour on average that would be coming out of that station. So that's the impacts. You have basically 8 vehicles in the morning, and you have...
No,
no.
With all due respect, I understand that, and I understand what your focus is. I'm talking about a larger picture of the whole impact, not just with the addition of the fire trucks, which I know is not going to be dramatic, but it's already, in the opinion of the people who live on that street, already too congested. It's a half a mile of thickly settled residential street that's about 25 feet wide. And as you said in your own report, traffic is already going well over the speed limit.
No backups.
My question is,
I understand, but
I
to put
wish
in-
you weren't answering me because you don't have control over this.
I know.
It's to the board in general, what considerations were made on this issue of traffic?
So if I may,
No, I was just going to say in relation, and it's pretty interesting, Mr. Tisdale just told me, we pull out to Central Street, and that averages 15 to 20,000 vehicles in a 24-hour period. So the 3,000 was something I just didn't understand. I just wanted to know what, in contrast, that was.
so the impact, according to the study engineer, is approximately 2 fire apparatuses an hour and 8 employees showing up for work every 24 hours because they work 24-hour shifts. That's the impact.
To give you a simple analogy, if you have a glass of water that's full to the very top, it only takes 1 drop for it to overflow. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next issue that has been a topic of discussion, and that is the emergency response perspective of the site location. Chief?
Thank you. I'll keep this, I mean, we did touch on some of this, but when tasked with this, and just to know where I'm coming from, I was made chief in July 2021, and then that's when I was onboarded to the fire station. But I have worked here I'm in my 29th year in the town of Stoughton, responding to and from 99% of that time. I was a shift lieutenant since 2001. So I had known all the studies in the past that East Stoughton was the place. We know that. Any of the firefighters back there know kind of how we want to offset the town, given the opportunity for one fire station. And again, this town probably needs 3 or 4 fire stations, to be honest with you. But we understand the heavy lift of building a fire station. But emergency calls over 5 years, that's our heat map. I could just kind of run a report on the IMC. It's our software. And it populates a map. So as you can tell, there's higher incidence, obviously, in the downtown area, but then it's kind of spread out. So, and it's not.
I'm going to ask you to define heat map.
Sure. Heat map is, what it does is it populates how many responses we have done on an emergency basis to that area. So, you know, for instance, right downtown center, it's 1,064 emergency incidents. Now, those are anything from medical, fire calls, alarm calls, any type of assistance on a more of an emergency level. It is getting busier in this town. I think everybody knows that, and everybody understands Stoughton is not what Stoughton was. We're just getting busier. Whether it's the pandemic has increased this, but since 2020, our call volume's gone up 22%. We've gone 1,200 calls over where we ended in 2020. So there is a need. How we looked at that, if you can go to the next slide. One of the things we wanted to do, and I kind of outlined this with sort of these starbursts, is, you know, you have your Central Street here, and we have Freeman Street, which is 1.2 miles away. This new station actually makes Station 2, Central Street, a better location than when it was originally placed. Because it really, as you can tell, it tactically and strategically, it kind of splits the town in half for us. Now, the main star in the middle is going to remain the administration, but what this is going to allow us to do is respond more efficient, more effective to the areas where the red. Station 2 is already static. It is where it is, you know, right on Central Street near Brook. This will offset it. So when this is important in operations, because when we start deciding on who's going to respond mutual aid, who's going to respond on our mutual aid ambulances, this is all planned out. I'm actually working on that right now. It takes a lot of effort to work with mutual aid towns to understand what their resources are and make sure they're available to the town of Stoughton residents. This kind of districts out our town, but it's also better on our initial responses. It allows us, and why do we like this area? Because, yes, we run Prospect Street right now for a call. If we're on 27, or if we're at the Blue Hill Alzheimer's and we get a call for Pleasant Street, we are going to use Prospect Street. It's just the way this town is designed. We look at our running routes. We do not want to go past schools. We don't want to go past playgrounds if necessary. We look at the time schools get let out. Safety is our job. That's what we are. That's what I'm tasked with, providing safety to the town of Stoughton, and responding there safely is a real priority, because two things. One is, if we don't get there, that emergency continues to get worse, whatever it be. But the other thing is the safety of the firefighters, the safety of the citizens on the road, commuters. So we look at, you know, there's a whole running route, straight lines, line of sight, as John put on it. We can see, and just to touch on this point, to see 800 feet gives us time at a car traveling at 45 miles an hour. I also think we may be able to slow vehicles down with that area, but you know, for us to be able to see line of sight rather than pulling out on a turn or trying to wait for a turn to see if it's clear, I think we've all pulled out on certain areas in this town. It's very difficult. So the goal, current Station 1, and like I said before, engine, ladder, and 2 ambulances. In the future, we just want to offset that. So the west side, the Central Street Station has an ambulance to respond to the people in the west side quicker, more efficient. You know, the station up on Prospect Street, engine ambulance. The ladder is cross-staffed. And what I mean by cross-staffed is we don't have the manning to just man a ladder truck like some areas. So if you're on the ambulance, if a fire call comes in and you're in, quarters, you're going over to the ladder and responding in the ladder because typically fire calls or alarm calls necessitate the need of a ladder truck. It's got a lot more equipment on it. If they're not in, we respond just the engine, and probably if it's a fire, the engine from the other side of town. So that's kind of our thought. Go ahead and go to the next. I think there was one more. You know, it was important that when I first went in here, and with no disrespect to anybody who was in there before, I think the committee that worked on it for years did a very good job, and we're tasked with a very difficult job. One, to try to find space for a public safety building. When that didn't work out and they couldn't find it, and then they found out the expense, they decided, and the town decided, all right, well, what is the real priority need right now? And that was the fire station. They asked me, Chief, what do you want? Will this work? Will this work? And I said, yes. I said, we're limited. Well, first they told me we're limited with how much money we can borrow from the town. We got to be fiscally responsible. I said, I will do an operational only fire station. Operational only means we are responding on emergencies only. That's what that building is built for. I was also working here when Station 2 was built. I can tell you one thing, and I don't know whether many people have talked about the process. This process is above and beyond. I've seen it done twice, and I understand, and I lived through Central Street, okay? I have all the data. I actually brought it today. The HVAC systems were the cause of the mold. It wasn't wetlands. I have studies. I have actually the work that was done. They put in residential size HVAC systems in a commercial building. They put residential gutters on a commercial building. It's the way things were done back then. Right now, I can tell you, with working with Pomeroy, having a construction management company, along with an architect who's specific. I mean, I'm sure you do other buildings, but these public safety buildings, they're my go-to for the absolute knowledge of what is required for, you know, decontamination of our gear, decontamination of our equipment, decontamination of the turnout gear that we wear into fires, having a clean zone, really a dirty zone. We call it a hot zone, but how we can walk through the building and not have the dirty stuff hit the clean living areas. And why is that a concern? The biggest problem in the fire service right now is cancer. And I talked a little bit about it at the FinCom meeting the other night. The PFAS, we were fooled just as much as everybody. We have firefighters. We just had firefighter Little die of occupational cancer a year ago. Okay, no doubt brought stuff back from fires. We didn't have the clean areas. We didn't have the right extraction stuff to get all the toxins off the gear. We will have this now in this building. This building, I told them, all I care about is sustainability. I want a good, solid building with good mechanicals inside the building. I don't want a repeat of Station 2. If you remember, the chief who built that station wasn't even from Stoughton, from Streamwood, Illinois. All the blessing to him, but I have a lot of interest and investment in this town and in this building and in these firefighters. Okay, so the structure of the building was what was important to me. Build it for not only now's needs, but the future. And then just to be fiscally responsible to the community. That's all I look for.
Well done, Mike. Are there questions for Mike with respect to the strategic decisions that were made for this location regarding heat zone? And just so you know, we're going to cut the last section short to open it up to Q&A. We're going to deal with your sections. I'm so sorry. Just for the interest of time, the last section that I was doing, the statistics are what they are. I'm not going to waste your time with that. After we finish with questions for Mike, we're going to go right to our OPM, and then we're going to open it up for questions to the whole audience. So questions for Mike.
Yeah, Chief, congratulations on this finally getting done. I mean, it's really needed for your department, and I think
Thank you,
it's a
Mr.
great
Fay.
thing to do.
Appreciate it.
You talked about the quality of the building being important. I've seen the bidders list. I hope they are well vetted.
Me too.
I've seen a couple of the names that are on there, and I hope the town does the right things and really looks into them.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I do too. Every step of the way, my fingers are crossed.
If I may, there's another response to that. We have a thing called DCAM, the Department of Capital Asset Management for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Every contractor is rated. There's not a single contractor, including Suffolk Construction, that's got a perfect rating. That's just the way the construction industry is. But we have vetted the top 2 contractors in great detail and done due diligence with DCAM. We have their scores, we have their ratings, and we've spoken to the town managers and fire chiefs of other projects they've built. And we feel very comfortable at this point. The OPM has done his own research that the lowest bidder is a responsive bidder, and that's what we're required to meet. The standard of RFP is the lowest responsible proposal. So thank you for that question. It's a good one. Any other questions for the chief? Yes, sir. Please state your name.
Jim Barron, 49 Donald Road, Precinct 6. You mentioned about PFAS, and I've been reading recently that the International Firefighters Association wants to get rid of all of the PFAS. Has there been any kind of a study done on this so far?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. There's been multiple studies, and there's a lot of science-backed information that's come out of it. And the International Association of Firefighters, along with the International Association of Fire Chiefs, have started a lawsuit, as Cynthia pointed out the other night, against your 3Ms, your DuPonts, your companies that knew exactly what they were doing. It's still in our gear. It's used in the stitching. We are trying to get away from it. I did put in for some capital to replace the gear. One place they cannot, or they're having a hard time to protect us from the fire, which is an acute injury as opposed to a long-term. It's still in the stitching, and we're looking for ways to get away from that. But as far as Stoughton, we've gotten rid of all our foam. Is non-PFAS. Everything we do now is whether it's clean cabs, trying to get clean space in here for the living quarters. I mean, for the apparatus bays and stuff. We're trying, but yes, there's a lot of litigation, and there's a lot of science back that this is exactly where it's coming from.
If you have to get rid of the PPEs to get rid of these things here, that's going to be a major effort.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to, I put in for capital to get 50 sets. I think what I'm concerned about, I can wear my gear. It's when the gear heats up that the PFAS are given off. I can wear my gear outside, even though I tend to go inside way too much. Just my firefighters will tell you. But that's just, anyways. So I'm going to replace their gear first. Okay, the secondary set will be washed, waiting. They wear for a short time. Once their good new set is cleaned out, we're going to get them back in that. There is a plan. Thank you.
Go right ahead. Yes. One more, and then if you wouldn't mind, we'll follow up. We're going to finish the budget, the building design and budget, and then go right to Q&A. So if one of you has to get home early, go first, and then we'll wait for the other one in public session. We're making you decide. You'll be first in the next session.
I just want to say, can you hear me here?
Yes, sir.
Because I can't hear myself. Peter Ventresco, 587 Canton Street. I just want to say one thing about this building. There's been a lot of controversy over it, wherever it is and everything else. But I'm happy this building is not going up like the police station and fire station 2, where they didn't have any project manager. I forget their names. I had them on my show one time. But to watch this and make sure it's done. The other two buildings I just mentioned, they didn't have a project manager. And everything was done by local people in these building committees.
There you go. We heard you then.
Huh?
We heard you now. Go ahead.
Maybe I should try that one.
There you go.
Hear me? Oh, yeah, geez, that's much better. All right, so they have these building committees with local people, but they never had like a plumbing contractor, masonry contractor, heating contractors, or anything like that. So that's why we have these buildings with so much problems, like the police station for the heating system. They don't have a big commercial heater for the building. They got 140,000 BTU hot air systems. So the whole thing was ridiculous. But this building here, it's being done right. You got professionals that are going to oversee this whole thing. So I want to thank you for doing that.
No, thank you, and thank them. They're my go-to experts on that side.
Ma'am, do you want to go first? And then we'll go on to the building design and the budget. We know this one, Wes.
Okay, it's all set?
Yeah, all set.
Yes, this is more of a safety question. Is there going to be, I know this may be a silly question, but there's no silly question. Is there going to be you folks are going to be so buried in that, it's very buried, believe me, and in that area, is there going to be your own personal fire hydrants?
Yes,
except for an emergency?
Yeah, no, there actually will.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
yep.
Okay, I was concerned
And,
about
you know,
that.
And I understand the concerns, but fire stations are built all throughout the country, really. In every neighborhood that goes up in Arizona, there's a fire station that has to be put up. You want to be near your residents, but also, I'll make it short, look at your homeowners once we're in, because you are right there beside us, and again, we're right there for you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to go to the final two sections. We're going to go to the final two sections, which I'm sure are of great interest with respect to building design, and then we're going to flow right into building budget. And then we're going to open it up to you folks for as many questions as you'd like to ask. John, we're looking forward to this. All right, gentlemen.
Thanks, Tom. My name is Glenn Gallred, one of the project architects that's been working on this, I'm going to say this project, but the project has been a number of projects over the years, as was mentioned earlier. It started as a study for the entire town's public safety facilities. Fast forward, it became a fire station project. All that work laid the groundwork for how big the fire station needed to be, so that was helpful in that we hit the ground running. Bottom line, the fire department needed about 36,000 square feet of space. We had designed a building that had everything in it, administration, the headquarters staff, and the operations. The next iteration of the project split that program, as the chief and others have noted, to an operations business end kind of facility. That's the one we're talking about tonight on Prospect Street, but the other half being split off at Freeman Street for the administrative functions. The couple things I would like to touch on while keeping it short, I think it's important that it's been mentioned the type of construction this is, the vetting of the contractors and anyone working on the project is significant. In Massachusetts, this kind of project goes through what they call controlled construction. Not only do the contractors have to be vetted, they were all pre-qualified before they were even allowed to put in bids. We worked with the OPM and the town staff to do that right up front. But it also means the designers, the engineers, the architect, the principal in charge, are all on the line personally. We sign affidavits at the beginning of the project stating that it's designed accordingly, and at the end of the project that it has met the specs and the intent of the design. I hope that gives a little confidence. We care very much about these buildings for many reasons, the least of which are our own concerns, but primarily the fire department. What I can say is the building is being built to risk category 4 structural standards. This allows it to sustain 140 mile an hour wind-borne objects flying at it, so think hurricane or blizzard or other catastrophic events. It's got redundant backup structurally to the mechanical systems, to the electrical systems. It's designed to support the staff day in, day out, year round, regardless of what's going on around it. And as the, excuse me, as the chief noted, the separation of the dirty zones from the clean zones is key. There's actually separate mechanical systems that feed the two different parts of the building, so there's no chance for cross-contamination of any of the chemicals or exhaust or other fumes. And I guess the last thing I wanted to make sure was clear to everyone that the Freeman Street project, when that is complete, it will not have active response vehicles there. I don't know if that was crystal clear. It strictly is an administrative office function for the command staff to have an EOC facility for when and if it's needed, or it can act as a public meeting space, as well as a Board of Health office. And otherwise, the only other thing I wanted to touch on was the site characteristics themselves. I think one of the things that came out of the geotechnical investigations showed that, yes, there is some imported fill that's as shallow as 6 or 8 inches or as deep as 6 feet. It really does vary across the entire site. Where the building or the roads are being developed, any of that, what we call unsuitable material, will be removed, placed on site, spread around, and refilled with structural fill to build on to make sure we have a solid building. That's all standard construction practice. There's nothing atypical about this. The subsurface conditions are actually fantastic for constructing a building on. It's glacial till primarily underneath there. This is good, strong, structurally sound soil. And I guess to reiterate, yeah, it is a business-looking aesthetic, right? This is a operations functional facility. Simple materials, keep the aesthetic clean, easy to maintain. But I think I personally appreciate that it reflects the sort of business end of operations, right? This is not necessarily a day-to-day public business interface, although certainly the department would welcome anyone with questions or immediate needs if they were in the neighborhood and needed help. But with that, I think we can turn it over to Taylor.
Thank you, Glenn. And thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. I'm Taylor MacDonald, a partner at Pomeroy Associates. And we were hired in 2018, and I will say that you guys in Stoughton keep us on our toes. So we've been through the few iterations of this project all the way up to, as Glenn was referring to, up to the town meeting vote that took place that spurred this project, Prospect and Freeman Street at the same time. So if you go to the slide of the schedule there, please. So this schedule, we set this schedule in late 2021. Basically right at town meeting, we were working off of this schedule. This is the same schedule we presented then, the same schedule we presented at select board updates. We've stayed on this schedule. There was a master schedule we were working with before town meeting, and it was actually, I was looking at it today, it was actually very close. So our schedule has really stayed right on track, and that I think that speaks to the team and the effort that everybody's put into it. So really, I think everybody knows where we've been to date. You'll see that yellow line there that's showing where we are now in March. We went through schematic design with these buildings. We'll talk about Prospect Street first, actually. Schematic design, then we did an estimate. We went through design development, and then we did an estimate. We went through construction documents, then we did an estimate. We recently just completed schematic design and an estimate for Freeman Street. So the plan here is that now that we have our bids in, we'd like to award those bids. Barring any delays, obviously any delays are going to cost the town money, and we don't want to see that. So we want to keep things moving. Now we have 16 months for construction, and the plan is to start the design development portion, which is, you call it your middle phase of design, right about the time that Prospect Street is about halfway done. So that we're finishing our design and we're getting Freeman Street out to bid at basically the same time that we're finishing Prospect, and they can move in. The reason being is they can move out of Freeman into Prospect. We don't have to pay for a temporary facility, which could be $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. They are very expensive to do, not to mention house all the apparatus that they have. So that's the reason for the phasing there, which really helped when we were looking at this two-building approach. And so we would be finishing Prospect Street right around, we'll call it summer of 2024. Freeman Street would start back up, and then we would be finishing Freeman Street in summer of 2025. I'll move to, we'll call it the bidding update. And we had 5 bidders. I think we had 8 qualified GC bidders. I spoke to the other 3. The reason they didn't bid on this project was they were just plain too busy. So I wasn't surprised. And actually, what we're seeing in the bidding environment, 5 is a lot more than most people are getting. We bid an HVAC project on Friday and didn't get any bidders whatsoever because people are too busy. So we needed our number to come in for this anywhere below 19.3 million. Our bids came in at 17.8 million. That is a huge savings, call it a $1.5 million savings. And frankly, we haven't seen that over the past 2 years. Anybody that works in construction can tell you that the 2020, 21, and 22, really 3 years, haven't been too kind, and the increases have just been astronomical. I was looking at another building. We did the Brewster Fire Station in 2014, same exact size building, and that cost $11 million. Same exact square footage. So that just gives you an idea of, we were at $480 a square foot back in 2014, now we're at $700, and it is what the industry's at right now. We just got estimates in Abington for a schematic design, again, right around the same square footage of this for a fire station, $20 million. So the numbers are correct. These have been estimated by professional estimators, multiple professional estimators, and the number that we are seeing, we feel very comfortable with, we're very happy with. So all in all, we have really 2 funding sources. We have what was approved at town meeting, the 27.3, and then 6.4 million of ARPA funds, which makes our total budget 33.7 million. So with this newest bid that came in and a refreshed Freeman Street estimate that we just got in about 2 or 3 months ago, we're sitting right now about $1.3 million under that budget. Now, things could change, obviously, with Freeman, and it's a building that it's a renovation. You don't know, but we have contingencies built in for that, and that total at 1.3 under, that includes the demo that's already done. So the unforeseen conditions with that building are taken right off. The storage tank is removed. The land's purchased. So that is exactly where we sit as of today. Thank you.
Okay, folks, we're going to skip the last section, that data. If you have questions on it during Q&A, which John will be first, feel free to ask those questions at that time. So, John, with Q&A, let's begin.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. John Anzavino, Precinct 4, Finance Committee. We'll just get down to the numbers, okay? Because you talk about 27.3 million being approved, which we were told we had to approve the full amount when you go for bonding or what have you. But I can tell you it was either August or September when the town manager at the time presented to the Board of Selectmen a financing option, and that option was for a $27.3 million fire station with $6.4 million in ARPA funds, and I'm going to use round numbers, so it would limit the borrowing to $21 million. At the Finance Committee hearings, guess what we were told? $27.3 million building, using the ARPA funds, the borrowing would be limited to $21 million. Town meeting, same thing was repeated. Since then, in looking at your latest estimate here, we are now up to $32,386,641. That certainly seems like more than the $27.3 million project that was proposed, voted, and taken to the town and voted. I'd like to know how we ended up with the ARPA funds being on top of the appropriation that was voted, which we were told had to be done, and all of a sudden we're still under budget. As far as I'm concerned, you're $5 million over. based on what the town was told and where we are today. So can somebody explain that?
Well, the original 27.3 that was brought to town meeting was based on a gross square foot estimate. There was no professional estimates done on that. Robin Grimm did, yes, say that at the time, and we had still needed to go out for professional estimating at the time to do a schematic design estimate, a design development estimate, and build the budget like anybody would. So as far as, yeah, that's the answer.
All right, so even though we were told they would only borrow the 21 million and the ARPA funds would make up the difference, and they were very happy or comfortable with the contingency built in at the time, and I understand things have changed a bit, but we also have a building now that's just over 2,000 square feet less than what was proposed at the time, and you're only talking about 2/3 of the projects that were in this article, because none of the estimates that we've been given, with the two updates that were given to the board and the estimate that's here, none of these include Central Street, which was part of the original project. And we're told, well, we could do that with in-house people. But that wasn't part of the original project. The original project was three-pronged: New Station, Freeman Street, and Central Street. And now Central Street, for whatever reason, is not included at all. So how does that fall out of the project that was approved and say the town will cover it?
You want to go?
We're still paying whoever's doing it for the town.
I would just like to make one clarification about your 2,000 square foot comment. Not 1 square foot of program has been lost. That savings was due to the refinement of the design from a concept schematic level. I think it was 27,200 square feet. That's probably the number you're referring to, versus the as-bid size is about 25,200.
I know, I mean, I understand things were looked at tighter and they were able to reduce the square footage and so forth.
But no program, nothing was cut out of the building at all. I just want to
Just the square footage, that's all.
Yeah, because of efficiency, right?
Well, we had another building that was built and they cut out about 25% of it because they didn't have the money. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I understand that. And I understand that it was the access areas or what have you. It wasn't the program areas that got cut. But the building, nonetheless, the building was still smaller than what was originally presented.
Previous project?
But I still haven't got a solid answer on how we can be $5 million above what was actually presented to the people as what the building would cost or what the project would cost. I mean, this is one of the issues the Finance Committee had and why it failed with the Finance Committee. We all said we would like the building, we liked the concept. What we didn't like was the bundling of 3 projects into one cost, because this is exactly what we were afraid of. Things start falling by the wayside, and they say we'll cover it somewhere else. But even if you're using town departments to do the work, the townspeople are still paying them to do that work, and it means they're paying them to do that instead of paying them to do whatever else they would have been doing. So how does the third leg of the project just fall out of all the estimates?
I'll talk to the three-pronged approach one. I don't know if after Brian could hit on the spending amount and the article, that might help. But the reason it didn't drop out. The reason it's not included in what we're estimating here now is because as the numbers were going up and up and up, we were getting very nervous about every penny we had for the 2 most important projects. You know, what we're doing at Station 2 is basically making dorm rooms. It's putting up partitions, it's adding doors. There's no major renovations going there. We wanted to spend the money where it needed to be spent on the 2 newer stations. So it didn't go away. You know, if all goes well and our contingency can stay where we want it to be, we can use funds from this, and that's the plan, is to use it for that work there. But the idea was we only have so much money. Our estimates before bidding were showing a building that was $20 million. We were very nervous about the bidding. We cut this thing, not square footage, not program, but to the bone in terms of how we're going to build this. What's the easiest, most economical way to build these buildings? Because we were afraid we were going to come in over budget. Now we're lucky enough they did not. But it was a decision made by the committee to put those two buildings up front.
If we
Oh,
could,
that's fine. I mean, I've seen your plans, it looks very nice. It really does. And I know you came before the Finance Committee after the first update to the board, you did come to the Finance Committee to give us the same update. And we appreciated that because it is an important building and we know we need it, but I still don't know how we ended up going $5 million more than what the townspeople were told the project was going to be, and yet it keeps moving forward.
John, the town council has a comment on your question.
Thank you.
And I apologize, my microphone battery had died. But
No, I took it out.
oh, you took it out. Well, there you go. He was tired of hearing from me. So I can't speak to the history, and as you'll recall, I wasn't around during this time period as town council, so I can't speak to what Dr. Grimm maybe had advocated or explained, and I wasn't at this town meeting. But I can tell you from the perspective of my office, and to the extent bond counsel and all the other professionals that work on a project like this, the fundamental documents that we look at are the town meeting vote, and that's a legislative vote of the town, and then the vote of the from the ballot question. And so those are the fundamental documents that we look at to determine what is our borrowing authority, what does bond counsel say, what did the voters authorize, and what did town meeting authorize. And so we don't look at anything else. So the vote is the vote is the vote. And when we take this and append it to our real estate documents that are recorded at the registry, or when we send it over to bond counsel to review, when we go out to start bonding these projects, this is the only document that matters. That's the legislative authority that we were granted and the authority we were granted by the voters. And I said it before, I'll say it one more time, the vote is the vote is the vote. So the minutes and any of the talk that preceded it, that's not legal authority. This is.
So the basis that you were given to take a vote, it doesn't matter after the vote is taken. Whatever you were told doesn't matter. You don't have to listen to what you were told, because that's what the vote was based on, was that it would be limited to $21 million in borrowing.
Well, I'll give you another example. And again, I can't speak to that. I wasn't there, and I don't know what people were told, and
Well, I
I
mean,
wouldn't speak to it anyway.
I'm sorry,
But
go ahead.
Let me give
Go
you
ahead.
another example. When the state legislature establishes a new statute, it's the statute that gets printed in the book that matters, and that's that. So, for example, if it's speeding or some other, kind of criminal or motor vehicle offense, it's the statute that matters, and that's the only thing that is going to be looked at. So now, obviously, there was debate, on the House floor, the Senate floor, and there's probably a lot of materials exchanged to explain to those voters in the state legislature, the great and general court, why they should vote the way they should vote. But ultimately, once they do, and that becomes law, that's the law, and that's what we look at. So the same process plays out at town meeting. That's the legislative body of the town, and information gets discussed and exchanged and debated. But ultimately, it comes down to a vote, and then a law, a legislative act occurs, and that's this. So I can't speak to your other points. I wasn't part of it, and I don't know the history, but I do know what's written on the page. And that's the only thing we as lawyers and as lenders and all the other people involved in this process can go on.
All right, we'll just have to keep that in mind at town meeting, that no matter what you're told there, it doesn't matter, because in the end, it just goes the other way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We have an online question from Patricia Colburn. Patricia, are you there? Patricia Colburn? Patricia, I believe you're muted.
I'm here.
Okay, you have a question, Patricia.
I'm not actually sure if I do anymore. I guess I just want to reiterate what John said. I understand that the $33 million, it doesn't violate the articles as they were voted, but it does violate the spirit of what those votes were for. And I think by not having a building committee and not having members of the public on that to say, hey, wait a second, that's not what we were told. It's a disservice to the town. And I think the next building project that comes up is going to have a really hard time passing unless we fix whatever caused this confusion of a 27.3 versus a 33.7 project. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Appreciate your comments. Other questions? The floor is open. Yes, sir. One after another. How's that?
Jim Guerin, 49 Donald Road, Precinct 6. I see that the CTA is the low bidder. I used to do this when I was an engineer a long time ago, and it always troubled me with the low bidder. My company insisted that I go to them, but it was my job to find out what they didn't understand about what they were bidding on. Who did with Pomeroy, who did the bid tabs for this thing here?
The bid tabs, I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Who's the architect?
Durham Whittier.
Okay, okay. Who did the bid tab there?
The tabulation of the bids?
Yeah.
Via the e-bid site, that was done automatically. Basically, as soon as the bid's closed, we get a spreadsheet that catalogs all the bids, who they are, and so on.
So everybody ensured that this guy, CTA, I guess, didn't miss anything? He didn't misunderstand what he was bidding on?
So let me...
I think it would be wise to talk about how close they were.
Yeah. So before I even get to the bid, so any project over $10 million in Massachusetts, your bidders have to be pre-qualified. So what that means is we put out an RFP that says, we're going to be having this project. Please send us. It's a pre-qualification RFP. Send us your documents. So we get documents from every GC that wants to bid it. We get documents from every plumber that wants to bid it, HVAC company. We get over 200 packages that we have to go through. It's about a month-long process that the whole committee actually helped with. You go through, you read we have certain criteria. They all go through that same criteria, and there's a ranking form. And then we get together and we say the ranking for this contractor is X. Do they pass? Yes. Anything below an 80 is a fail. We can't use them. So only the contractors that were approved in the pre-qualification process were on the list to bid this project.
I'm not troubled about the qualifications of any of these people.
So yes, and
I'm sure that's true. I'm just saying, when they did the bid tab, did they ensure that this guy is covering every part of this?
Absolutely, we did. And the difference between the first bid and the second bid was 1.1%. The difference between the first bid and the third bid was 1.8%. They were very tightly together, which is a very good thing. I've already spoken to the owner of CTA. He has agreed. Nothing missed. We've gone through that bid tabulation. There's no reason that we have to believe that there's any issues going on with their bid.
Fine. Thank you very much.
Other questions?
More just Greg.
State your name.
Greg Pokraka, Prospect Street.
Thanks, Greg.
More just commentary on exactly these numbers. Lou, you remember 27.3 million. Joe, you remember 27.3 million. It included the 6.6 million. That is problematic. And if people don't see that that's problematic, that's even more problematic. The town went on the basis of that 27.3 million. The town meeting members voted on that, 27.3 million. I don't understand why now it's 27.3 plus the 6.4. As our new town manager, this should be of concern to you as well. Is it of concern to you?
Well, I'll tell you what it is. It shows the impurity of democracy. I wasn't here.
Remember, facts are friendly.
Oh, you're sharing with me your perspective on things, and I appreciate that. What I know is what council just spoke of, because I wasn't here. If I felt differently, I'd speak up. What the governing body voted on, I don't know if that was before or after ARPA funds were received, was the number that's in that book and that we're presented here today. In terms of going back into history, we can do that, but as council said, I was in the legislature for 13 years, and they say passing laws is like making sausage. The process is really ugly, all the variables are changing, but at the end of the day, you have a good product. All we know, all I know from looking at history is what's in the public record stamped by the town clerk right now. That's all I have. So am I concerned? I love the people I'm working with, and I've found them to be very integrous human beings. I love the people of this town. I find them to be very, very integrous human beings. But in terms of understanding what went on in the debate on town meeting, which I'm told is a very long process, what went on in public, what went on behind closed doors, what went on between my predecessor and everyone else, I can't possibly speculate on that. Like council, I have to revert right back to the documents that were passed by the governing body. And I've read it at length. I was told that the town meeting vote was doctored with because the original vote did not say eminent domain. So I raced over to look at that like I've chased every lead that I've received, and I found out that the article was amended, and it did include eminent domain. So am I concerned? I've chased down every single issue that's been raised by the public, including from people in this room, and I've got to the bottom of it. I haven't found anything that I would call nefarious or not integrous. And so I hear your points. I'll continue to look. But at the end of the day, as Brian pointed out, the governing body, many of you are town meeting reps, spoke clearly. That's where I am on it.
And so you were not here. Brian was not here. The chief was here. Most of the members sitting up on that board up there. Mr. Tisdale, you were here. How do you remember it presented? Do you remember it being presented as 27.3 million plus or 27.3 million including it? It's simple. It's really simple math.
You're looking at me, so I'm assuming you're asking
Yes.
asking me? Okay. I do remember the $27.3 million number. I remember it based on estimates at that time. Based on not a hard number, it was based on estimates that were met to possibly change based on bids. So that was what I remember.
Yes,
town meeting.
and that makes sense. And I think we all remember the 27.3 million, but we remember that as the top total. We don't remember the ARPA being on top of that. So to say that this is within budget and under budget is not an accurate statement. It's either.
Thank you. Next question? Yes? I got it.
You go.
Thank you. Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I've been a town meeting rep for 40 years. I know I look too young to. You know, if we went by every estimate, and in the past we have, the problem is we approve a project, it takes 2 or 3 years to get to this point, and we don't have enough money. So we go back to town meeting to increase the funding. And town meeting's very accommodating, and they increase the funding. But we have to be realistic because this is the real world. When we wanted to do this a couple of years ago, we could have got a 1% or less borrowing. Now I understand it's going to be a little less or a little more than 3. If we take another 2 years and we add more money and we go back to town meeting and we go back, I'm no predictor of finance. I wouldn't be sitting here in jeans. I'd be in a palace with gold toilets or whatever. But it appears that inflation isn't going anywhere but up. And so instead of the little over 3, it'll be 6 or 7 or 8. And we'll still be arguing like we are now about certain things. And I have a bias. I'm from a first responder family. 2 of my nephews are firefighters, not in Stoughton. Some of the firefighters are former students. And I also live on Park Street. And my health isn't what it should be. So response time for me is extremely important, and this will be better than the ambulance coming from Freeman Street. We can pick things apart. It's like pulling the hairs out of your eyebrows. Eventually, you won't have any eyebrows. No plan is perfect. No funding is perfect. As a town meeting representative, I don't think I was lied to because I live in the real world. My father was a contractor. I haven't heard of things going down in a long, long time.
Peter?
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up,
Your name, please?
Peter Banis, Precinct 2, town meeting rep, and obviously I've documented a lot of things since last year. I still haven't got an answer about the eminent domain thing. There was 9 specifications in the book that we spent a ton of money on, 172 pages. I understand the analogy of Mr. Winter saying, yep, the town meeting voted. When I watched the meeting again last night, December 6th, the whole first half an hour, it was because it was all virtual, okay? I don't think town meeting members, they voted, we knew we needed a new fire station for 30 years. And everyone voted for that we all know about that. If anybody knew that the eminent domain, and whether or not I get an answer tonight, are the 9 specifications that were going to protect the taxpayers and the citizens in the list is in the letters, in the copies that everyone has had, because I've passed this information on to everybody, all right? And I was looking for the scoring details. We had a higher acceptable rating for 850 Park. There has never, ever been any stated negative numbers or negative facts about 400 Prospect. There was never anything. In 850 Park, we spent the money with the engineering and with the architecture for 400 Prospect, and they said we didn't do anything at 850 Park because it was too much money. So we talked about all this finance stuff, and I'm not a big finance guy, believe me, okay? The fact is, on the December 6th meeting, during the video, is either September 21st, when Dr. Grimm said there'll be plenty of public meetings and information passed along. I believe everything was virtual. And people in town, as the people that we had tonight, everyone's left. And I'm not giving up the battle, but the bottom line is this. On December 6th, both the town manager and the chairman of the board at the time said everything was vetted. I believe that if a 212-1 vote from the FinCom, would anyone call that vetted? I don't know, I guess. The vote on the Conservation Commission, I think it was January 9th of this past year, the 23, and I guess that means that was finally vetted. And now the planning board has been carrying this along, and there's a meeting this Thursday. I hope everyone will maybe try to show up. It won't do any good, but show up, and I guess then they will vet it. So here's the main question. Who knows the answer that we can just disregard the 172 pages that we put into the December 6th of the 21 book with all the safeties for the town, the 9, and I could read them, I'm not going to read them. Location, egress, et cetera, et cetera. Are those just totally eliminated because of the eminent domain? It's just a yes or no answer.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to give that to town council.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter.
You will.
And so people know, I've heard this question before from the speaker, and we've actually discussed it prior to tonight. So I'll try to recall my answer and do the best I can. But the criteria that I believe you're speaking of pertain to, I'm just going to break this down into general categories, a procurement side. So site selection, all these other elements that you're referring to as these 9 criteria, I believe you said, all have to do with the procurement process.
Okay.
Eminent domain is not procurement. It's not. It's a separate statutory architecture, and it is not under procurement. So eminent domain took place after the town meeting vote, the December 6th town meeting vote that you were referencing. That town meeting vote, and I quoted it earlier, authorized the Board of Selectmen to take 400 Prospect Street, not any other property, but 400 Prospect, by purchase, gift, or eminent domain. And so we fulfilled the wishes and decision, legislative decision of the voters based on that town meeting vote. So,
Okay, I
hope that's
understand
clear.
that. So then, would you know the answer to that? Are the nine points? I can read the points if you'd like. It's the letter that every board has it. The select board has it. The documents were passed out to everybody for the last year. Okay, and I just need to know if the 9 points, the 9 specifications, are they just eliminated? Because I don't think we compared the two properties, and it's not fair to the taxpayers to be spending the money and talking about the budget issues when we didn't even evaluate 850 Park, because I think they said it was, how much was it? Was it like 600,000 more? And I think we probably wasted that much money. So is there an answer to, does the eminent domain or does the procurement laws, whatever those laws are, and you said they're very detailed, does it just shift aside the information in the book of December 6th of 21? Do we just shift that information away and just disregard it to the taxpayers, into the citizens?
Peter, I'm going to try and help with this because you and I have had this conversation many times, and thank you for your engagement. I mean that. Fran, if you could be ready to compare the two of them again on that slide as I say this. Okay. This was an RFP. Both prospective bidders were evaluated against the criteria you just talked about. Both of them achieved the same measurement, the same satisfactory standard. Put eminent domain aside because it's a separate, unrelated issue. With respect to evaluating the best site, procurement did evaluate the best site, and Fran, you can take it from here. We looked at the screen. I'd like you to go back to the percentages of asking price versus assessed value, if you don't mind.
No problem. When we did the second RFP, we did evaluate both the properties, and they were both full properties. The 400 Prospect Street and then the 850 Park Street, which was the full 850 Park Street was the all 4 lots.
All 4 parcels.
Yep, 4 parcels. Both of those were rated advantageous. And then we recommended to move forward because of the price. And if you look at the price, what Tom was mentioning, the proposed price for both properties, for Prospect and for Park, we looked at the assessed value, and there was a big difference in the assessed value for the 850 Park Street.
Can you cite them, Pam?
Sure.
Fred.
400 Prospect Street, 1.15 million, and it was assessed at $829,800. And honestly, and this is meant to be a little lighthearted, we did the percentage, and I was so afraid of John Anzavino being like, "You're a % off." So I took the percentages off, and we can do the percentages later. But that was a big. That was we're going to say 38% gap, and then the other.
On Park Street.
No, that 38% was on Prospect.
Next is on Park Street.
Right, Park Street. The $1,900,000, it was assessed at less than $500,000, and then we figured it was over a 300% increase. No, 300% difference. So that was I couldn't bring that to the town and saying, okay, we'll pay $2 million for a property that's assessed at $500,000.
So I'd like to summarize that, Peter, if I may. Again, I wasn't here, but I do have the same procurement certification as Fran. I would say that 99 out of 100 times when a procurement officer is faced with a decision on A or B, proposal A or B, both of them are ranked advantageous, but one of them is 300 to 400 times, 300 to 400% market value to asset value, while the other is 30% market
38%.
value. When one of them is $500,000 to $600,000 more, it's not a hard decision before you start considering all of the other factors. Now, if one of them was advantageous, the other one was not advantageous, then you have to take into consideration the financial delta. Do we want to pay more for a project, for a site that is that much better than the one that's less expensive? They were both ranked independently as advantageous. So how would we look here tonight, looking at this screen, speaking to the community, saying they were both advantageous, but we spent $500,000 more on another site? Purely from a procurement perspective, that would be unexplainable.
Tom, if I may?
Please go.
There was also, and I do recall this during the procurement process, you know, one of my considerations were, and after the studies, but the recent study, Parkins Prospect had the best response times done out of the GIS data. So when I was asked, and I try to stay in my lane as far as operations, I looked at that, and the numbers aren't even close on your 4, 6, and 8-minute response times from that area. And this is all calculated through the GIS, and there was a study that was paid for by the previous committee through this project, but through the previous committee. And I remember Fran asking me, you know, what's, and I looked at the data, and I kind of knew anyways, but it's backed up here.
I respect the chief's.
Pete, if I may say this, could we get a copy of that document to the audience? I think that should be made available to the public.
The taxpayers, the people that have paid attention to this, and we've gained. When I started this questioning, my first letter when my neighbor Joanna O'Reilly, who spoke earlier, told me about the rodent problem, I started this. Okay, we talked about the special town meeting and the December 6th virtual meeting. And I guarantee, and the town meeting members didn't do their job. That is the reason. It did pass. It didn't pass, you know, extensively, and the voting in February didn't pass extensively. But it passed, and that was, everyone wanted the fire department. I made a false statement. I said that the location was not voted upon, and I made an error in all my documentation. I would like anyone else that has any other figures or any information that I put down in all my documentation for this year, I would like them to tell me where the mistakes were, okay? Because I know there was a lot of the quote is a lot of false information has been passing. And I would like if someone can just later on, not tonight, jot down the points from all that documentation I did and tell me what the false information is. The reason I keep bringing up the 9 specs, the plan for 400 Prospect Street, I believe, has 32 parking slots. Part of the RFP, the whole 172 pages, somewhere in there, the RFP says you need 75 parking spots.
For the public safety building.
That was for the public safety building?
Yeah, that was not for the...
Okay, so the 32 that is in the plan is the right amount?
Am I correct?
Okay, that's fine. That answers that question, because that was of a major concern. But so as the taxpayers, we said the difference in the money was $600 grand or $800 grand, whatever it was. And from the procurement standpoint, and during the October 18th meeting, when on the item agenda was number 9, I believe, and the chairperson, Mrs. Roberts had to say there was a typo. The typo was 2.6, and it was supposed to be 2 million because the property was reoffered. I don't know all the stuff about 850 Park, you know, pulling out their bid, and I was trying to look at the best decision for the town of Stoughton. Okay, Mr. Cavey mentioned that we don't want to play. I think he said Candyland and go backwards. What are we going to do? We don't have a plan for the land, so I don't want to put the $2 million on the taxpayers. So the thought was that maybe the taxpayers may have accepted the fact that if they spent $2 million more for 850 Park, we still owned 400 Prospect. And something should have been done, but there's documentation that others have tried to build there. And when you look at she went by the valuations and all that. Look at the lots that are bundled in those sections. I think there was 6 or 8 different parcels of land. Okay, and we mentioned in the interview that we had, with Mr. Coulter and Mrs. Roberts doing the tour of the town, that was really cool. That was a cool thing. And I do believe Mr. Coulter says, yes, I do see wetlands around the sides, but where we're going to build is dry. So again, there's another issue that people just need to know. That's all. My point, the whole point of this whole fight for this last year has been, we were offered a other piece of property, and however the process went along the way, and it was just, they took the bid out, they didn't hear anything. All the legal stuff is way over my head, and all the financial stuff is way over my head. I just know the taxpayers of Stoughton and the firefighters deserve a building that has a property that would be a lot more expandable, a lot more ability to have future use than what we're trying to jam in. And when you look at the maps, and I asked this question at the Conservation Commission. Okay, I asked the question in 2 different maps. One said preliminary plan, and the other one said property plan, a locus plan, and the building was moved differently. It appears just the engineers, and that's their job. Make it work. Mr. Anzavino brought up the fact that it looks like it's in the wetland area. Okay, and then we had to get an easement. And all these little variables, along with the questions in the deeds clear, I guess, we don't know that. But the whole point is, I know we spent a lot of money. And I think one of the gentlemen said they've been on this since 2018 because of the committee. And the committee was abolished, and then everything went behind closed doors. And when 2 select board members asked if they could be on the the meetings, they were told that they couldn't. So those are a lot of the facts. I got a million other things, and I appreciate everyone listening to me. And I said, when Mr. Gito told me it's a done deal, I looked at the properties and I said, how can it be a done deal? And that's why I started the fight, okay? And then when the Finance Committee was disrespected, when it was a 2-12-1 vote and they were totally disrespected, that was my other reason for working so hard on this thing. So I understand Thursday night, I hope people can show up. I'm sure the planning board is only looking at what these folks have presented, these professionals presented to the planning board. Wonderful information. It was absolutely perfect, okay? And there's no dispute about that. So I guess...
I want to genuinely thank you. I mean, Peter and I have met 4 or 5 times. There's never been an uncivil word between us, and I consider Peter a friend, and I wish more people were activists like him. But I want to answer some of your questions. I can say to you, and when you said I don't know about the deed, I've reviewed the deed. I've got advice from counsel. I've had another attorney review the deed. It's clear title. And I would encourage anybody to go on Norfolk County Registry of Deeds, look up the site. You can look at the deed yourself. Now, I just want to pose this hypothetical to this body. I've only been here 3 months, but I have felt like a private investigator since the day I arrived, because people keep me tracking down what they heard. Can you imagine, just close your eyes and imagine this for a minute, and think about the man to your immediate right who I have great respect for in terms of his analytical skills. Imagine that we go through an RFP process, both sites come back advantageous, and we make the decision to spend $500,000 more. In Stoughton, there would be a grand jury investigation the next day, and it wouldn't go away for years, and it would stop this project from going forward. And by the time we got to it, when the investigation was over, to Cynthia's point, it'd be another $3 to $5 million. And that is a problem. The democratic process, as the result of the democratic process, was a town meeting vote and a ballot issue. Now, that doesn't mean citizens shouldn't always ask questions. And I'm the first to say, and I know that the chair and the vice chair and the rest of the board would agree with me, next project, whenever that is, there'll be hearings like this from day one, because it's your money. But I've chased down every lead that's been provided to me and not found anything that's nefarious. But again, I'll close with, imagine if we're sitting here tonight trying to explain how two sites were rated advantageous, but we spent $500,000. You know, and I know. Everybody would be saying, who did they know? Where's the deal? Where's the backroom deal? And it would completely distract away from what we're trying to do as a community. Build a fire station. That's all I wanted to say, Peter. Thank you for all.
Thank you. And if you don't, and I appreciate, we have had four meetings, and I actually wrote, when I took the agenda, I wrote on the top that Mr. Coulter said that the meeting will go on and all questions will be answered as long as it stays civil. And I think it stayed civil, and I'm doing the best I can to be as civil as I can, which is not easy.
I'm very proud of everybody.
But
So I just want to say something, okay? I'm in the real estate business, and when we
Sir,
put
your
that,
name?
Paul Carter, I'm one of the owners of 850 Park Street.
Thank you.
Okay, I've been doing real estate for 30 plus years. Okay, so when we put that bid in for $2.4 million, we've had an offer on the property for that price. So it was the market price. And secondly, the former town manager said we can only pay the assessed value, and I said to her, "You don't know what you're talking about, because that's a statute applicable to a city, not a town, and Stoughton is a town." So the property would appraise at whatever it came out at, okay? It's vacant land with a house on it, okay? So if that was the biggest problem, should have came and said, okay, we'll take 850 Park Street subject to getting an appraisal, okay? And if it didn't appraise, everybody in this room would have said, okay, now we're going to pay and go after 400 Prospect Street, okay? But to say because of the price we are eliminating 850 Park Street is, you're insulting the intelligence of this town, okay? It was based on a 20,000 square foot building and 300 feet per parking spot. You got 32 spots. You've got probably an acre, maybe 2 acres up there they're using, okay? You could have put the site at 850 on 2 acres, and you would have had 4 acres left that the town could have sold, okay? So I know the real estate business, and so the whole procurement thing and the whole appraisal versus assessed value, I think people have to realize that there's a big difference between an assessed value and an appraised value, okay? Your house in Stoughton is assessed at $400. You're going to get $700,000 based on the market. So that's all I had to say. I appreciate everybody's time tonight.
No, and we appreciate your comments, and I understand your passion on this issue, obviously. But we do have a chief procurement officer, and it is her decision, her recommendation as to what best meets the standards set forth by the Commonwealth for purchasing property. And, you know, we don't take into consideration what other circumstances exist other than what the Commonwealth tells us we can consider. The Commonwealth doesn't tell us, doesn't ask us, is the owner of the property a Stoughton resident? It doesn't ask us or tell us to ask what's the appraised value in the market. We accept the bids that are sent to us. And it was our duty, I wasn't here, but Fran has described it, it was our duty to accept the best responsible proposal, RFP. And for the value, for the dollars, the town selected another bid. And we keep forgetting, the first bid we received was withdrawn. That's a statement of fact, I believe. The second bid we got was for a property that we couldn't assess, we couldn't value, because it was a piece of a larger property. So that's why, I hear you, sir, I understand, and I understand your passion. But the interests of this group was on what's the best value for the town of Stoughton, and I don't think the taxpayers want us to do it any differently than that. Thank you. Other question? There is a question, Patricia again, online.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Patricia, go right ahead.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to thank you for including Google Meets for those of us who couldn't make it. And if there's any way somebody can put a link up to the presentation that's been up all night, I'd like to be able to download that.
Can we do that?
And I guess my second thing, I didn't make it clear in my other comments, but I'm absolutely for this project. I don't want it to stop. I'm not interested in changing the site. Firefighters have waited long enough. We need to get this done. My only concerns were going forward, if we could consider including building committees again, and if we could include the words total project cost in any future building articles. I think that would maybe help solve a lot of our problems. But thank you for letting the Google people in.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that. And that will be updated, Trish, tomorrow morning? We'll update the presentation tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Would it be on the website? It'll be on the website.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Peter. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the other-
Just one last
Oh,
comment.
I'm sorry, Cynthia. I didn't see your hand up. I apologize.
I'm sorry, Cynthia. Just one last comment. When I keep referring back to the December 6th Orange Special Town Meeting book with all that information that was in there, okay, and we had the 9 specifications, we didn't even take any consideration to 850 Park because of the price, and that was explained. That was explained why we didn't do that. But when you look at the 9 points, we never had any negative stuff about those 9 points. It was the egress and it was the visibility, and it was just to the common taxpayer, and I think that's why so many taxpayers and town meeting members, we wanted to know how to compare it. It's very hard to compare it, and I understand we compared it from the price, and then once that ended, the procurement process ended, and to even accept looking at the 9 specs, possibly for the other land, might be worth it. And then secondly, the $2 million that Mr. Cavey mentioned on October 18th, and when you watch, and that was my second mistake. One of my mistakes is I said that we only voted on the fire station, not the location. We did vote on the location. On one of my documents, I did make a mistake. I did make a mistake, and I admit that it was a mistake, and it had to do with not with the location, but with the fact that we had no way to compare the two comparatively, because there was nothing else done at 850 Park.
Right.
So. All right, thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I took everyone's time so long, but
duly noted, Peter. And please
thank you for having this, Mr. Coulter. I appreciate it.
Please don't apologize. That's why we're here. Yes. Oh, I guess John's next.
I have a legal question back to the eminent domain. So as part of the December 6th meeting, there was no wording on eminent domain. It was added at the following meeting. Do you know why that was added? Was that added for the intention that the town was aware of a pending lawsuit on that property?
So, hold on, let me just make sure this is on. Tom could have taken my battery again. So I can't speak to intention. It was amended on town meeting floor. If you have a full copy of it, you can see that there was an originally proposed motion and then an amended motion. And it was the amended motion that got passed. But I can answer your question this way, and that's as a lawyer that attends a lot of town meetings, when you see an article about the acquisition of property, one of the things that you always want to make sure you have in that article are all the options the town may need to be available if it passes. So when I see an article that says to acquire by purchase, well, that's tying the town's hands because it doesn't say purchase, gift, or eminent domain. And sometimes eminent domain, which can be friendly, by the way, is a very good option to have. So a tool in your toolbox. For example, we often use it if there's a title defect that we can't cure. Well, eminent domain can cure that. And so just as a drafting matter, as a legal drafting matter, I would always want to see that in the article because I have no idea if we're ever going to use it. So this is December 6, 2022, or 21, excuse me. So at that point, I don't know if anyone could have foreseen the future. We certainly didn't know about a lawsuit. And we don't know how we were going to acquire the property. And so we want to keep those options open. So that's, and again, I'm speculating a little bit because I wasn't at this meeting and I didn't write this, but that's something that I would have done had I been there just to keep those options open.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I'm not done yet.
Oh, please go right
That was
ahead.
number one. I had seen documentation that showed there was a letter to the town dated December 3rd, 2021 regarding this pending lawsuit on this site. So again, I was assuming this was added due to that letter coming through regarding the lawsuit. So you were not here at this point in time? Is that true?
I did not attend that town meeting, but a letter is not a lawsuit. So
No, it was just a letter from the lawyer, from the property owner that was talking about a pending lawsuit. I can share it with you, and you can...
Happy to be educated.
Okay. Okay. Tom, you mentioned real quick, the town would be in big trouble if they paid $500,000 more for something that they shouldn't, based on the procurement process. But yet, through this eminent domain, Owen Kiernan had bought the property for somewhere around $450,000 in May of 2020, and a little over a year later, he was put through the $1.15 million RFP, and yet the eminent domain, I believe, would have allowed us to pay fair market value for that property. So essentially, we did overpay for that.
That is what he bid.
Yes, but with the eminent domain, you do not have to adhere. Brian can confirm or deny that. I don't believe we still have to pay the RFP price, right? You said we paid damages, which would total the asking price for that, right?
that's correct, and the number came from his bid, but you're also correct that the award of damages doesn't necessarily have to mirror that, but the award of damages often is a reflection of information available, which would include an RFP process and other information available to the town. So there's a correlation, not necessarily cause and effect, but you're right.
So with eminent domain, you could pay a lower rate. How is that lower rate determined? Is it based on fair market value? Are you required as part of eminent domain to pay minimally fair market value?
No, and I think I just alluded to that answer a minute ago. So you assess the information that's available to you, including, for example, if there were an appraisal done or an RFP done or any other sources of information, and then you set the award of damages. And so while the town, through the Board of Selectmen, get to calculate that number based on considered and professional advice, it's not imposed upon us, if that's what you're getting at. We get to set that number. And so, for example, in another taking, if it's a roadway, the value might be zero. I mean, the value of a roadway by itself, if we want to put, for example, utilities on it, something like that. In another case, I'm just speaking, in a hypothetical, abstract way right now, they might assess a value of zero. But you use the information available from your professional team and arrive at the figure.
Thank you. Tom, I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you. We've been asking for a public forum like this for a very long time. And in September, September 7th, 2021, Dr. Grimm said that in the time before the November 8th meeting, there will be huge public outreach on this, and particularly, there absolutely needs to have the town hall type of meeting, no question. I'm disappointed that this probably could have avoided a lot of trouble down the road if this type of meeting did occur back then. I'm glad you allowed this and made the time for this and brought together the panel for this. So for that, I thank you. I hope we've learned some lessons from this process that will help us move forward in the future. Thank you.
Well, I thank you for that comment. I just want to make clear that I've done this at the direction of the Select Board. They share passionately my interest in keeping all the means of communication wide open. So on that note, I hope we see everybody again at the public information hearings the board has asked me to schedule for the various topics that were passed out today. I share your thoughts that facts are friendly, information is power, and we are always going to endeavor to get you more accurate information so that informed decisions can be made. And I want to repeat what I said earlier. I'm tired. I think you can tell. It doesn't mean we have to agree. And I don't say we. I'm your town manager. I'm not a citizen. It doesn't mean everybody has to agree. That's okay. That's democracy in play. But we should all be dealing from the same deck. That's all. Whatever happened in the past happened in the past. We'll all grow from it. We will. We'll all grow from it. And we'll be a better community because of it. Yes, one more question. Or as many as you'd like, I should say. I've been told I have to be here till the lights are out.
Thank you. My question is, when you do evaluate the projects, it's... What? All right, maybe I'm not holding
there you
properly.
go. You're good.
Okay. So you take into consideration the valuations, but why are we not taking into consideration what it's going to take on each site to accomplish the building? For example, from what I've been hearing tonight, there seems to be a lot of site work that's going to be necessary for this project that's not going to be necessary for 850. So when you stop, I'm saying, why aren't we weighing the full picture? We made the decision just based on assessed value.
I think that's a great question. We did not perform a 21E or any kind of geotechnical analysis at 850 Park, but forgive my layman's perspective. I'm not a procurement, purchasing, town manager, nor public safety professional, but it looks like the town bought a bigger piece of land for a lower price with, I think most importantly, better response time. Is that not the end of the discussion? I mean, notwithstanding legal, deed, everything else seems to check the box. It's a better site. 400 Prospect, to be clear.
And the other thing I was going to ask is, you had mentioned a company did the environmental searches or whatever. Do we have a RFP, not an RFP, a DEP file that's been filed with the state? Has that been done? Because I have not seen.
Yes.
I have not seen one posted at the entrance of that property. They're always posted near the street or close to the street as possible. There's no posting there.
It was posted on the fence when they were doing the work. It's taken away now. They're done.
Yeah, that's fine, but I'm just saying it should be there at the site. I mean, it's probably just a technicality. But I think my last statement would be, and I think it would echo with what was said earlier, these projects should have committees of the citizens, taxpayers of the town. My understanding is they eliminated a previous committee, which is fine, but instead of setting up another committee, they gave the ball to the town manager, who's not a resident of Stoughton nor Massachusetts. And I don't know, I guess a lot of people on this floor participated. I don't know how many of them are Stoughton residents, maybe none. So this is what happens when you really don't have people in the town able to participate in these meetings. It's, I think it's hopefully it won't be done again in the future, because we should, and maybe we could also control the size of the committee, because I think at the high school there was, 20 or 30 people. Well, that's way too much. But the point being, I think this was ill-fated because of how it started off. Like someone else mentioned, I guess all these meetings never happened, apparently. So I would just ask the town manager that, to use his influence to make sure we have residents of the town And even more specifically, there are a number of residents in our town in just about every trade you can think of. They never get appointed to these committees. So I would also urge that when you're setting up these committees, that the people that come forward, try to get some that have, plumbing experience or, whatever experience it might be. Because there's a lot to be offered by some of these people in our own town, so we should take advantage of that.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you. And again, thanks for setting up. Look forward to the next one. Can I sell popcorn at the next one?
If you would like.
Thank you.
Other questions from the audience? Yes, sir. Peter.
That thing's not too good. That red light is bad, by the way. Oh, no. Red light is bad. Turn it on. Oh, I thought it is. I see the red light. Green light.
Peter Ventresco, 587 Canton Street. This is going to be the last time I'm going to get up. This is either the third or fourth time that over the last 20 years we've been talking about a new fire station to put it someplace. And the last two, the Board of Selectmen, not this board, went to the same site on Park Street that the school owns, and they spent a few $100,000 to lay out the road, and how the site's going to work and everything else. And they go the whole 9 yards of town meeting, and then when they present their program, the superintendent of the schools will get up and say you can't build there because it's school property. So that was a waste of money. So the Board of Selectmen did it twice like that. Now, so far, I think we spent $1 million plus to find a place and get shut down. So if we've gotten this far, keep going with it and finish it rather than kill it here and go someplace else and spend more money. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? By a show of hands, would you like us to schedule another meeting with the same agenda, or to or to address any other new issues that may come up? Okay. So my office is open. Should the public like to have another meeting about this or any other issue, the board has authorized me to conduct these sessions at the will of the public. So should you have a desire for a meeting on this or any other topic, just let my office know, let me know, and we'll schedule it. Yes, Lisa, please state your name.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lyons and Precinct 2. I would just like to reiterate what the prior gentleman said about allowing residents to be on committees. I specifically asked to be on the Get Out the Vote committee, and I was told they're all set. And I expressed how important the voting issue was to me, and I was still denied, and that was by a select board member as well. So we do need to do better in that regard.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions? I'm very grateful to all of you for coming here and for staying here. This is what deliberative government is about. I'm very grateful. Was there another question? Did I miss someone? Raise your hand. No? Oh, yes, Peter. Hey, you made a promise.
Yes, I did.
And you lied.
That young lady made a comment. I want to
Go back.
Peter Ventresco, 587 Canton Street, Town Meeting Rep. I said this earlier. Maybe some of the speakers that come after me forgot. These building committees that we form are just lay people, and that's why we had trouble with the buildings in the past. So if we're going to have committees, they got to be people in the trades, contractors to do this kind of work, so you don't run into these kind of problems that we have in the past.
Yep.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask that you call for motion?
Yes. First of all, thank you so very much. This was so informative. Thank you, panel. This was so very informative. I agree it was informative and appreciate it, and thank you to you, the audience. A motion to adjourn. Second, can I get, all in favor? And all in favor, unanimous decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah.